Okay, welcome everybody. We've got our quorum. I'll call this meeting of the Standing Committee on Planning, Transportation and Environment to order. Madam Clerk, may we have the roll call, please?
Mayor Robertson is on leave for civic business. Councillor Louis. Councillor Stevenson.
I'm here too.
Councillor Deal is in the chair. Councillor Jang.
Hey, I'm here.
Councillor Reimer. Councillor Meggs is on leave for civic business. Councillor Ball is present but will be on leave for civic business in the afternoon. Councillor Carr. Councillor Affleck. Councillor DeGenova. You have a quorum, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. As chair of this meeting, I'm suggesting for reports that have no presentation, speakers, or consideration items, we adopt the recommendations collectively in a single motion. There are currently no speakers registered for items 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Does any member wish to hold one of these for consideration or separate vote? Seeing none, would someone like to move the consent agenda? Okay, all in favor? Any opposed? The consent agenda passes. That includes the proposed amendment to subdivision bylaw 5208, the 2014-2015 animal welfare grants, the 2010 Burrard Street liquor primary license application, and the 2015 UBCM conference sponsorship. Those items have now been passed on consent. We'll move on to the other items on the agenda. We need a motion, or that's been done. Sorry. We'll now move into item number 1, SRO actions and proposed single room accommodation bylaw amendments. People have been sending in questions to staff. So Ms. Bond, perhaps you would like to start us off with some answers to questions.
Thank you. Abby Bond, Director of Housing Policy and Projects. So I think we actually covered most of the questions in the previous council session. What I do want to do is just summarise the report in front of you today. So the report here, just as a reminder, is to expand and clarify our definition of minor repairs and conversion, and to give the Chief Housing Officer additional power to approve an SRA permit for minor repairs. It's also to clarify when tenant relocation plans are to be provided and what's to be included. It's to recommend the waiving of fees for minor repairs, but increasing the fees for exiting from the SRA bylaw. It's recommending that staff continue to work with partners using $2 million of capital plan money to develop a fund for private owners to encourage reinvestment in their stock, and to work with the province and council committees on further changes to the Residential Tenancy Act, and finally to work to get additional health supports into SROs. So that's a summary of the report. If there are any further questions that I didn't cover last time, we'd be happy to answer questions.
I don't see anyone on the queue, though, so we'll go to Councillor Carr. If you could hit the button before we're moving on, that would be great. Councillor Carr has some additional questions.
Speak very quickly, Madam Chair. Question actually, and it's one that has come up from a variety of members of the public, and that is it possible to attach either a rent range or a description of income levels of the people that are targeted to live in the SROs as part of the SRA bylaw? In other words, have the bylaw itself include some kind of signal or words around the kind of people that would be occupying the rooms, or at what level of rent.
Thank you, Councillor. So it is the Vancouver Charter which gives us our authority under the SRA bylaw. So what I would like to do is just consult with our lawyers before finalising my answer to that question. So perhaps I can come back to you later.
Not a problem. Great, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Councillor Jang.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I have a question about the definition of comparable housing. And, what's the definition of it? How are we going to actually operationalize that? And I'm concerned a little bit about if we try to define it too strictly, that it takes away flexibility from staff, for example. If some situation that I can't dream up in my head comes up, because there's always a million machinations or something, what comparable housing means is part of it, and are there guidelines that we can develop for that? Use guidelines as a reference, for example, just because I want to make sure that folks get comparable housing, but at the same time not fetter staff from finding unique solutions, which you're very good at, as we saw yesterday, for example.
Thank you, Councillor. We have in the bylaw, in the wording of the bylaw, we've talked about locating comparable or better accommodation at comparable or lesser rents. We have a number of practices that have been emerging about the location of those comparable accommodation. We want to see people's situation improved or bettered, or an improved situation in rent. But as you indicated, obviously with the vacancy rate both in the SRO stock and more broadly in Vancouver being quite tight, then we do need some flexibility also to accommodate tenants' own wishes. It would be possible for us perhaps to issue some implementation guidelines to further kind of expand what staff will be looking at. That's something we can issue to staff and to applicants to give a better understanding of some of the things, some of the detail around that without necessarily defining it in the bylaw.
So that would then give you something to refer to in each situation. And then if you find over, say, the next year or so, if the guidelines are working well, you can come back to council and make them part of the bylaws, or if they don't work, take them out or come up with something else?
Yeah, I mean, guidelines gives us an opportunity to set expectations and provide clarity to both staff and applicants. We can learn from individual cases and situations that arise, and we can refine and improve those over time. And if council wishes to see them or hear back about how they're working, then we can certainly bring that back and decide whether you want that to be included in the bylaw more formally, or whether we're happy to continue in terms of implementing guidelines.
I think certainly for me right now, what I would like to see is clarity. Yeah. Clarity not only for the developer, but for the residents, right? You know, they need to know what that means. Yes. So if we have some guidelines there to refer to, at least initially, then I think it would be a good idea to maybe think about putting them in later, but we'll see how it rolls out.
Okay, we can certainly take that away.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Councillor Jang. We'll now move to our speakers. Just before we move to the speakers, I wanted to comment that we passed a consent agenda earlier, and I didn't read out the title of the final agenda that we passed item, which was the sport hosting grant. I want to make sure people, if they were here waiting for that, know that that's already been passed. So we'll now move on to our speakers on this item, starting with Jean Swanson. Welcome, Ms. Swanson. I know you know how this goes. Up to 5 minutes, and you may have questions afterwards. Welcome.
Hi, everybody. I'm here representing Carnegie Community Action Project. I'd like to acknowledge that we're on the unceded territory of the Coast Salish people, the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish, and thank them for allowing us to be here. So, thank you for finally admitting that SROs are being gentrified and that it's contributing to homelessness. That's good. At first, when we read this report, we were optimistic, but it's very technical. And the more I read it, the more questions we have. And I'm hoping you'll postpone adopting it and leave some and do some more discussions with people who are in the know and maybe revise some stuff. So the CAP office deals with lots of people who are rent-evicted. They come in and just say, well, the landlord is trying to get rid of me. And we say, do you want to fight it? And they usually say no, because very few people want to live where they're not wanted. Or they say, oh, look at this form that was taped to my door. And it's a form that says they're going to be inspected for bugs, and the tenant doesn't know that the landlord is responsible for bugs, and they think, well, they're going to have to get out. Or the tenant will say, well, lots of people in my building are being evicted, so we'll go and knock on some doors, and then we'll find, oh, somebody's been evicted because the landlord says they need the room for the caretaker, or somebody is leaving because the landlord is renovating the common areas and the noise and the dust and the water cutoffs are too much for them. Or some people, some guy who maybe pays every 2 weeks and the new landlord doesn't like that, so he evicts them for non-payment of rent. And then another guy might have to leave because they've changed the key to a key fob and they're demanding a $50 replacement fee that he can't afford because he's on welfare. And other people are leaving because they've been paid to go, $400 to $2,000 in my experience. So these are all actual examples. The point is the landlord gets rid of people before their rooms are renovated. He doesn't go to them and say, we have to renovate your room, you need to get out. Take the Clifton Hotel. 50 people were gone before CAP and First United even got there to talk to the remaining 25. So basically, we're afraid that your change to the definition of conversion won't stop renovictions. In fact, as we've said before, keeping Section E as it is and interpreting it to mean a repair that has a material effect on the enjoyment by residents of the unit could actually be used to prevent renovictions. I also don't understand why you added the part to Section 5 about who has to pay the $125,000. Abby says it isn't a change, but if it isn't a change, why is it being added? So it's this part, it says, but only that you have to pay the landlord would have to pay the $125,000, and then the addition is, but only if the designated room ceases to be a designated room and is otherwise not replaced. So while you're increasing the amount, you're drastically reducing the occasions where you can charge it and giving away the biggest power you have to negotiate with landlords. Anyway, this is what I'm wondering. So no wonder Jeffrey Howes, who's the right-hand man for the biggest renovictor in the downtown east side, said that that change won't affect them because they're not taking their SRO units out of the SRA bylaw. So there's another problem, and that is when the city does negotiate with the landlord, like for example at Low Young Court or the American Hotel or even places like Atira or the Asia Hotel, you end up with deals where they only have to pay a third or even less, only have to have a third or even less of the units at welfare rate. So we're still losing 2/3 of the units. So if the city continues giving only a handful of welfare rate units when it negotiates, what's the point of negotiating? So there's a lot of things in this. My big fear is that homelessness is really on the upswing. This year you had 600 and some units opening up, and homeless count went down by 57. Next year, there's no new social housing buildings opening up, none. This would be a huge, deplorable headline. And you're losing the Quality Inn of 157 units. So if your SRO bylaw saves even 100 units, there's still 200 gone. And we're going to have an increase of over 300 homeless people next year just because of all the factors that are happening. So I could say more about what you can do about this. There's lots of things you can do.
5 minutes though, so if you
So if someone wants to ask me a question, I will answer it.
Thank you very much. Councillor Carr does have a question for you.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks so much, Ms. Swanson, for being here and all your advocacy around this issue. I do have a number of questions. The first question I have is regarding your statement that you would prefer to see Section E still in the bylaw, which is about the enjoyment of the people. I'm looking through this bylaw, and are you referring to Section E under...
The definition of conversion.
Okay, there's a definition of conversion, which is in Section 6. So it's 6E, and it's a condition attached to conversion or demolition permit. Now, the new wording that's not in the old definition E or Section E actually includes things like giving assurance that after completion of the repair or alteration, the owner will rent the designated room to a permanent resident. Do you not want to see that included, or give the permanent resident, this is Section EIV, gives a permanent resident relocated the first right of refusal to relet his or her designated room?
So that stuff is all okay, but the problem is, when does it kick in? And our fear is that because the new amendment says that the tenant has to be moved for the repairs, that most of the evictions will happen before it can kick in, because that's the way evictions happen. The landlord doesn't say, I have to evict you because I'm doing repairs.
Can you make sure
He
you speak
evicts
into
you
the
first.
microphone, Ms. Swanson?
He gets rid of you. He buys you out. That's how he gets rid of you. And then he might go and get some repairs, but you're already gone, right?
Okay, so I understand from what you just said, you do like those sections coming back, but the problem is the eviction first, at the beginning, prior to the application for any conversion permit or renovation permit. Isn't that happening regardless? I mean, I will ask staff the question. I mean, because you made it clear in your statement that most people are gone, as you said in the Clifton, 50 were gone before, CCAP even got down there to talk to the remaining 25. So if this is a prevalent problem, I'm not sure if keeping the old section E is the solution or what the solution is, but I will ask staff that, like, how do they get at that?
We have a lawyer, DJ, who's been up here and told you that she thinks it can be interpreted the way it actually says in section E without having the tenants have to leave, so that can be interpreted as a conversion, in which case that relocation stuff could kick in.
Yeah,
You
absolutely.
guys don't like to use that for some reason. I don't know.
Well, I will ask staff about that and the point that you've made, which is there any way to have at least some measure of these upgrade permits, and I don't know how that can be defined, but I'll ask staff this, to be done without tenants having to leave. I think that's your question. Okay, all right. You've asked.
Because what they do is they put in a laminate floor, right? That takes an hour or two. They put in maybe a new sink, a bar fridge. That might take an hour.
Mm-hmm.
That's how they renovate people.
Okay, all right. Thank you. The second point that I'd like to explore with you is the concern you've raised that after renovations, only 1/3 of the rooms, or the ballpark is 1/3 of the minimum of the rooms have to be re-rented at the 375, welfare rate, and 2/3 can be at other rates. So we've heard at this council table that if it's 100% at welfare rates, it's just not economically feasible, not without senior government assistance of some sort, that it's not feasible. So how do you see the dilemma of that? The rooms need to be upgraded. We all agree that they are in incredible disrepair.
So the province is selling off its housing assets, which I don't like. But anyway, they claim that they've got $144 million this year for housing, and $90 million next year, and $39 million the year after that. The city should have a proposal in there yesterday saying we have X, Y, and Z lots, and we want that money to build social housing that people on welfare can afford. And that proposal should have been in there yesterday, right. And it's absolutely got to go in there like tomorrow or this month to see if the province is really sure about if they really are going to use that money for social housing. At least call their bluff. That's what we need. We desperately, desperately, desperately need more social housing that people on welfare can afford. And when you call social housing, when you create social housing that you have to earn $912 a month for a bachelor apartment, you're not dealing with homelessness at all.
I'll ask staff about their plans. Thank you very much. I'm out of time. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Councillor Reimer.
Hi, Jean, or Ms. Swanson. I felt I was clear in your presentation, but Councillor Carr, when asking you questions, referenced, so you had two issues that you pointed to in the bylaw, the proposed bylaw. One was in section 4.8, and I understood that one. But the one around the definition, Councillor Carr was directing us to section 6, but the definitions are in section 1.2. So I'm sorry, I want to make sure I understand which section you have issues with. So it's the definition under E that said a lot of stuff. It explained a repair or alteration, what a conversion meant. So the new language says, and do not include the relocation of a permanent resident during the repair or alteration, and does not result in the room ceasing to be a designated room. That's the language you have issue with?
I don't have it in front of me. It's in the appendix to the report.
Yeah.
So there's two sections there. I think one is 2. That's the one that deals with the definition of conversion. And then 5 is the one that deals with who gets the $125,000.
Okay, then I am following along. It's a bit confusing because 2 is actually referring to section 1.2. It's the second change, so it's listed as 2, but it relates to section 1.2.
You know, I really wish I had a free lawyer who would help me figure this out, because it is very technical, and I dare say a lot of you guys probably don't understand it too well either. I've been reading it over for 3 weeks and discussing with people, and I still don't understand it. So, but I have grave fears that it's not going to do the trick, and that there's still going to be lots of evictions from SRO hotels, and that the 125,000 isn't going to be relevant because units aren't taken out of that bylaw. They stay in the bylaw and the rents go up.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you, Councillor Reimer. Those are all of your questions. Thank you, Ms. Swanson. Next up, we have Harold Lavender. Mr. Lavender, welcome.
Thanks. I also wish to acknowledge that we're on the unceded territory of the Coast Salish people, the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam. And yeah, and so my question about this bylaw changes, are they really going to work? I mean, I think the long-term solution to the problem is clearly to build a lot more social housing and to have them at rents that people can afford. And without that, I don't really think you're going to solve the homeless problem. And in fact, I think you're going to have a long-term structural homeless problem, which is, going to spend a lot of money, but it's not necessarily going to solve the problem because of the fact there's a huge gap between the rents that are being charged and people's income. And that's basically the crux of the problem. Too many people have too little money and rents are going very high, and even people who are supposedly trying to provide some housing are actually concerned about their own economic viability. And so that means, in fact, that's the crux of the problem. And the question being is, in fact, I think that trying to keep some of the SROs in still available it's a Band-Aid, because that's not the long-term solution at all. So you're talking about putting Band-Aids on a problem that's actually getting worse, just like in some sense the shelters. And so that's not the long-term solution, but it's maybe a necessary Band-Aid. But the question really is, in fact, whether these bylaw changes will really succeed, because right now I think you're actually acknowledging that you're losing a whole bunch of the stock, which is the last resort before homelessness. And in fact, reply to one of the questions asked, in fact, when you allow people to become homeless and shelter and everything, it costs a whole lot of money. So I mean, it's very short-term thinking, but it's a huge waste of public funds when you actually let things deteriorate that badly. So in fact, it does cost money. And, it costs, it messes people's lives around terribly, but it also costs a lot of public money. And so, in fact, you have to figure out how you're going to stop that. And so you have to provide more accommodation, which people can actually afford. And, and so when you're talking about, and so one of the big problems is with the investor class, who are sort of mentioned in the report in very sort of neutral or euphemistic terms, but actually people are there to make a profit, and basically what they want to do is raise the rents. They're not necessarily going to say they're going to convert the building or anything else like that, but they obviously have the intent of, and a market allows them to do that, is doubling the rents and replacing the tenants. Well, as they say, the tenants' rights aren't that strong in this province, and often people are pushed out because they don't know their rights or how to deal with them. There's not enough advocates. But I mean, that's a big problem in terms of actually, because where are they going to go? They're going to join the lineup of people who are at extreme risk of homelessness, and then you're just going to get thousands of more people who are going to fill up any spaces that are being built. So so that's the crux of the issue. I think Jean has pointed out, in fact, the definition of conversion is rather narrow and technical. And so, in fact, the question is, how many cases will it apply to, how many won't it apply to, and what are you going to do when it doesn't apply? I think rent controls are absolutely fundamental. And in fact, but I mean, and really you're looking at, I think the most important rent controls are preventing rents going up from $400 to $800, because that's going to lead to more homelessness. It's pretty clear. And, you know, and the question being, if you give, can you attach conditions? I mean, I think Councillor Carr's question, can you attach conditions which actually guarantee the rents will be, particularly if you're giving out money or anything else, that there should be conditions. So basically the rents can't go up, some can't go up 100% or something. I mean, you know, I mean, that's really crucial, in fact, to have those conditions. I mean, you know, I mean, I don't like the word comparable, but I mean, you know, but in terms of but it is true that, I mean, it's nice that people will be relocated, but if there's no place to relocate them, I mean, that's actually another problem that's rather huge.
Mr. Lavender, that's your 5 minutes. If you could wrap up, that would be great.
Oh, okay. So I just think that you really have to think about what you're doing and what effect will have it. And, you know, there is a social cost when people get rent-evicted, and, you know, and the people who rent-evicted suffer, but I mean, it's just also bad in terms of policy that people shouldn't be rent-evicted. And you have to really think whether this is going to protect people against
That's your time,
being
Mr.
rent-evicted.
Lavender. Thank you very much for coming out today. Next on the list, you have no questions. We have Fraser Stewart. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm not opposed to the bylaws or the changes to the bylaws. But what I would ask council is not to vote on them right now. I think they need a lot more work. This is not an area that you can compromise on, especially if the city is still serious about their commitment to end homelessness. The SROs are the last resort, or they are the first step into stability. I am also concerned that the city should be lobbying or spend as much energy lobbying the provincial and federal governments as they do on ending and stopping pipelines. The SROs are, and I live in an SRO, you know, they are absolutely terrible places. You know, I'm not here to defend the SROs. They are absolutely terrible. Nobody should be living in one. But they are necessary. Without them, I'd be on the street. I was on the street for a year. I don't want to go back there. Many of the changes proposed are good. Most of them are just window dressing. It sounds great that you're going to put raise the penalty to $125,000. That sounds great, but it's meaningless. To put in a vinyl floor, to put in a counter, to put in a bar fridge, none of those require a permit. No permit is necessary. So how could you charge $125,000 for conversion when it is actually conversion? When a coat of paint could justify a raise in rent of 125%, which we see happening all the time. This has to stop, and I think the city has the power to do it. And if you don't, well, why don't you? You know? Anyways, that's all that I have to say. Please take your time, think about this, because this really means a lot. This is not an area where we can compromise. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. You have questions. Mr. Stewart? Mr. Stewart, you have questions. If you could come back to the microphone for a moment, that would be great. And to all of the speakers, you might want to just hesitate for a moment to see if you have questions. Councillor Carr.
Yep. Thanks, Madam Chair. Thank you so much for being here. My question is really about the first point you made, which is take more time. And I guess I have a concern, which is what's the threat right now, the imminent threat of more people being rent-evicted and the greater loss of rooms in that time. And if you can imagine what specific issues need to be worked on, if that can maybe be done, maybe this bylaw can be voted on today, but there could be continued work. And what would that work be?
I think, well, first of all, you shouldn't consult with people who actually live in SROs. If you take the homeless count from last year, we had 615 new units that opened, I believe, and yet the homeless count went up. Well, or not base, yeah, it actually went down by what, 57?
Yeah.
If you take the year before, many units were opened, and there wasn't that much change. This year, nothing. You know, there's no proposed units. As Jean said, it'll be about 315 at least. I think she's kind of low on that number. It's going to be higher than that. Because so many SROs are changing over to higher rents that those people that are living in there are going to be homeless. There is no place for them to go besides the parks or the sidewalk. I myself have that concern. You know, I live on a very small pension, and I'm paying over 60% of my pension in rent. If we don't have a place to go and we can't afford the rent, then the only thing left is Oppenheimer Park. You know, and we don't want that again. So we need a stronger law than what is being proposed here, and I think we can do it. You know, there's goodwill here. There is goodwill.
I'm really very interested in how you believe this bylaw should be strengthened. Like, what are the specific areas that are too weak right now in your mind?
As Jean said, this is a very complicated bylaw.
Yeah.
You know, when 5 of us are reading it and 5 of us come out with completely different interpretations of what it means, it's, I don't like the section where the city is proposing grants to nonprofits that they could upgrade or renovate the unit, and yet they're only asking for 1/3 to be at welfare rate. I'm figuring if you're getting public money, you know, there should be a limit here. Also, people talk about the private that have to invest to upgrade their. That's just maintenance. And because it's a business, it's a tax write-off. If you invest in your business, it's a tax write-off. So there's no reason why you have to double the rent because you invested a couple of $1,000s. And it's only a couple of $1,000s.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hang on. Councillor Carr, thank you. Councillor Jang.
Thank you for coming, Mr. Stewart. And I was intrigued by a couple statements you made in response to Councillor Carr. Maybe we can explore them just a little bit so I understand the concerns you have. One of the first ones you had said was, you know, charging these guys $125,000 to convert a room won't make any difference.
No, that's not what I said.
Oh, okay.
Or not what I meant.
Okay, what did you mean by that?
It won't make any difference because they won't be charged that. They can't be charged that under this bylaw because they do not need the permit.
I don't think I went. Okay. I was wondering do you know the Low Young Court on Union Street? 406.
I know of it, but I don't.
Yeah, so because of the threat of this bylaw change, the $125,000, this abandoned empty building was actually brought back into service, where half the rooms will be at shelter rate and low income rate. And so, I mean, the landowners there decided, based on that this was going to happen, that they decided to reopen it for low income residents, whereas it could have been converted if they just taken the money, paid the money into condos. So, I mean, I'm just trying to understand, okay, well, just the threat of it has already worked and hasn't even passed yet, right? We haven't voted on it yet, but it's already resulted in at least 8 rooms at low income rate that didn't exist before. The other comment you had, you said you were against grants to nonprofits and to do repairs. Is that what you said? Just want to clarify.
No, not.
Okay.
Okay. I'm saying grants for nonprofits are a good thing.
Okay.
What is not a good thing is that they only have to guarantee 1/3 of the rooms at welfare
I
rate.
see. Okay.
You know, if you're getting public money, it's to do public good.
So the Ma Association, for example, yesterday received a grant for repairs. If they did not receive that grant for repairs, they would have had to raise the rent on all the rooms
No, they
in that
wouldn't.
building.
No, they wouldn't.
I know the Ma
They get
Association very
They get
well.
a tax write-off. They get a tax write-off. This is maintenance.
It seems to me is that it allowed the Ma Association to actually have the capital to turn the rooms that they have into quite livable rooms, which which they would not have been able to do before. So I'm just kind of trying to square the circle here. You have concerns about it, but at the same time, yesterday we had a grant and another, the Low Young Court saying the threat of it worked, and then you said, well, the grants don't guarantee it, but the Ma Association is not turfing anybody out. In fact, using all the money in all the rooms, which are all low income, for example, to actually repair the building and make it more livable for people. So I'm just trying to square the circle between the objections and what actually occurred yesterday.
Okay, you're talking about 8 rooms. 8 rooms. Stephen Lippman has renovated how many rooms and turfed out? 8 rooms as opposed to what, a couple of hundred?
Okay, I'm just trying. Okay. But in this particular case, we have rooms actually that was an empty, abandoned building back into the stock because of the threat.
Well, there's another thing that the city should go after. Why are there so many abandoned buildings? The one that I live in, okay? The owner has 3 buildings. There's 3 addresses there, yet only one of them is being occupied. Why?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, next we have Benjamin Smith, who will be followed by Mario Laudicio. Welcome.
I was wondering how I'd get up to.
Yeah.
Good morning. My name is Benjamin Smith, Coast Salish man from the Inshuk Nation. That's IN-SHCUK-CH. I live in housing in Chinatown, the Ma Society building. It is actually a nice building, and I'm here to, I believe, represent a group, part of our population that is, feeling the stress of the loss of employment and such. I learned a good value of employment since being 11 years old, being in my age group. I started working in fields, blueberries, picking blueberries, strawberries from 11 years old. So I learned the quality and need for money. Only in the last few years, since 2011, I found myself unemployed after a big, massive layoff in a place where I worked in Surrey. As I progressively became poorer and poorer, I found myself in need for a place that I could afford to live. I ended up in 2 different places in Surrey that were bad because I needed roommates. The first one, the roommates got my money for 2 extra months rent and then a month's rent and disappeared. The next one, the people there just partied and drank and stuff too much, so I couldn't live there. So I ended up coming downtown and finding a hotel where I am still today, the Asia Hotel on Pender Street. The thing that comes to my mind when I look at what's going on right now with the change in the language coming up for this, what's being talked about right now, is that often what happens as a result is the backlash towards the consumer, the person who needs the room, is that somehow the costs end up trickling down to us. Now, you know, I'm I pride myself in being able to work and, you know, be a productive part of society, and you know, being stuck right now on social assistance, it's just, you know, it's tough to, you know, have to be in this situation without added pressure of wondering if you're going to not have a roof over your head. And we all know we need a, you know, a basic foundation to get our day going, right? I know that the city, I studied background, and I know that the city is in constant search of how to end this homeless problem that is, you know, they've been aware of for quite some time in what I've read. And I'm, you know, see, I just, I guess I just really made my point by saying, you know, I worry that the change in language will result in it being trickled down to me and creating more of a cost in my rent, where I've already taken a good, I think $55 of my food money goes to rent already, and I'd hate to have more than that being taken away. I'd also like to add a joke I wrote. What was gentrification before they called it gentrification? They called it progress.
Thank you very much. You don't have any questions. Our next speaker is Mario Ladicio, followed by Vincent Fodera. Welcome.
Your Worship and councillors, thank you for allowing us to speak. We were here actually last week or 2 weeks ago when we first read about the amendment. I would like to say that I joined Jane and the other speakers previously. The word that I like to put forward is that we need help, and the city can help. We are part of the private landlord associations that do have the SROs, some of the SROs, and when we created that association, it was exactly to, you know, maintain, preserve, and improve some of the SRO buildings that have been in the area for many, many years, but they let go for so long. And just like I said before, we joined, you know, Jane's in trying to convince some of the city councillors that, you know, we would like to be able to improve those, you know, those conditions, because just like Mr. Stewart said, they're terrible buildings, but they are the buildings that they are, and we do provide a very, very needed service that right now it's not there. So where can we improve? I don't know. If it's just a maintenance issue, well, we cannot live on $3.75. We have to increase the rate because the taxes increases. Where can the city council improve? Well, maybe we can hold the, you know, some of the $2 million that we just announced that you like to do. Maybe earmark some of the hotels that are needed for improvements. You know, we can provide maybe better water service, better heating, better windows. We can't just look at the private landlord and say, he is going to do it all. We do need help that way. That's all I want to say.
You don't have any questions. Thank you very much for coming today.
Welcome.
Our next speaker is Vincent Fodera, who will be followed by Agnes Jackman. Is Vincent here? I don't see anyone moving towards the microphone, so we will move on to Agnes Jackman, who will be followed by Wendy Peterson. Welcome.
Good morning. My name is Agnes Jackman, and I'm a member of the Housing Campaign Action Team of Metro Vancouver Alliance. Back when our group first formed as a research action team over a year ago, Our focuses of interest soon became housing bylaws and housing covenants in the interest of maintaining and securing safe, truly affordable housing, particularly for the unemployed poor and low and modest wage earners. We initially talked about going after the creation of new bylaws that would help support this. What we found to our surprise was that there was already some fairly good bylaws in place, particularly in regards to SROs, SRAs. So why, we asked, wasn't Vancouver housing in better shape? We suspected that the problem might lie in the lack of enforcement of the existing bylaws. Over the past few months, we've come across articles and people's stories that would support this. An astounding example of repeated blatant disregard of the intention of existing SRO, SRA bylaws can be found in the actions of the Stephen Lippman companies. This is far from being a secret. CCPA and Pivot Legal Society have been monitoring his actions for years now, I'm told. My understanding is that his companies use a variety of underhanded ways to either evict people or get the tenants to sign mutual agreements to end the tenancy prior to applying for renovation permits, as has already been mentioned. This allows them to bring in new tenants that can afford to pay higher rents than the original tenants could. The result is that more lower income people land up homeless, and possibly on the street. The article by Jean Swanson in the issue 7, May 2014 of Downtown Eastside, Lipmanopoly, was very enlightening and concerning for me. And I brought it along. I'm sure some of you have seen it already, but there it is. And it's a game of Monopoly I know I wouldn't want to have to play. So thank you, Jean, for that. According to an article by Laurie Culbert in the Vancouver Sun, July 3rd, 2015, in 2007, 60% of private SRO rooms rented for $375 or less, compared to just 24% today. A couple of nights ago, I was introduced to the broken windows theory by a retired BC court judge. The term broken windows comes from the metaphor used to describe this concept. If a window is broken and left unrepaired, people walking by will conclude that no one cares and no one is in charge. This theory says that the little things matter. Stephen Lippman's housing enterprises are one broken window that needs fixing pronto. Vancouver Council needs to demonstrate that it cares and is willing to enforce its bylaws. It's just wasting time to either modify current ones or write new ones without following up with appropriate action. In regards to your proposed SRA bylaw amendments, I'm concerned that the language has qualifiers that can let owners and developers off the hook. For example, this paragraph makes the $125,000 fee for removing an SRO unit out of the SRA bylaw optional. And I'll just quote it. $125,000 may attach to a permit. Alternatively, as a condition of the SRA permit, Council may instead require an owner to enter into a housing agreement to secure units in the development of the property as social housing or rental, as well as securing some level of affordability in those units if they are permanently removed from designation under the SRA bylaw or to replace the units on an alternate site. I'm convinced that Council is sincerely concerned about the current housing situation in Greater Vancouver and about what the future holds if significant changes aren't made. I would just like to see a bit more backbone. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You have no questions. Next, we have Wendy Peterson, who will be followed by Sid Tan. There weren't any questions for you. Thank you. Welcome, Ms. Peterson.
Hi. So my name is Wendy Peterson. I'm speaking on behalf of the newly formed SRO Collaborative Project. We're organizing to improve the habitability and protect affordability in 4 hotels right now: the Regent, the Lion, the Balmoral, and the West. And we're using mostly the RTB tools. With more support, we would like to take on more next year. So I just want to thank Councillor DeGenova and Councillor Carr for initiating the discussion about SROs last November, and also thank Councillor Reimer and Carr for meeting with us in the meantime, and also staff for picking up on some of the suggestions that we made in November, like the loan and upping the conversion fee to closer to what we're seeing in San Francisco. Okay, but at this point, the plan, at first this plan looked good to us, as Jean was saying, and we were thinking about how to make each point stronger for tenant rights. Like one, we thought that you could apply a $5,000 relocation fee along with the right of first refusal to come back. And 2, we thought moving tenants to better, not just comparable housing like they do in the States would be a good idea. And 3, insisting that the grants and the loans only go to hotels with 100% welfare rate, and for management, and to hotels where the management operates under the residential tenancy branch, so that tenants have access to a fair hearing at RTB court before being evicted, or for repairs. Like, those are kind of bottom lines for us. But as Jean explained and others, it's complicated, and we've been looking at this a lot, and we now think that making the conversion fee not apply to renovictions, which is the Section E, is a huge mistake. And this plan proposed by staff could actually speed up displacement and homelessness. So I want you to put yourself in an investor's shoes, like the new owner of the Empress Hotel, the 76-room Empress Hotel, who just bought the place for $7.7 million. So once you find out that, 1, it's okay to renovate and come out of the closet with your intentions to renovate, and 2, the city will let you move all your tenants out all at once just for minor renovations, and 3, you no longer have to do the time-consuming work that Littman's folks have been doing to use the RTB to get rid of tenants one by one, or work a year or 2 in advance the hard way by coordinating harassment and payouts. And 4, you learn that the city's requirement for relocations is pretty low with comparable housing. So in terms of people moving out to another location, comparable, it's pretty, that's pretty a low bar. And then 5, you also know that most tenants won't come back, because it's notoriously hard to track SRO tenants who don't have phones, who are living in survival mode, and probably think that their current landlord is not okay and not want to come back. And knowing that also that the city has settled for some pretty humble amounts of welfare rate housing in their city-sanctioned renovictions, like Low Young Court that was just mentioned by Councillor Jang. So there's 2 units there with a possibility of 6 more with rent supplements, which I'm told the rent supplements aren't entirely secure with the province. And also the American Hotel, 42 rooms converted, 6 rooms were secured at $400 a month for 10 years out of that deal. So even with grants tied to nonprofit management, like the Murray and the Asia hotels, as others were saying, it's working out to a third at welfare rate guaranteed. So you, as an owner, and once you see what the possibilities are, and that you don't have to pay a conversion fee, that you're not going to get penalized for doing this, then I think the permits look like a good idea. And they look like a good deal. And I think your hotel becomes slightly more valuable. And I think conversions could speed up. And I think we could lose rooms that people on fixed income can currently afford in that shuffle. It's complicated. But I'm kind of immersed in it now in the hotel. So I'm trying to figure out how we're going to stop this. And I'm not sure this is the plan to do it. I really hope that you'll take a couple more months to think about it, talk with people in the community, make sure we really understand what the language is here. Maybe there's a possibility you can just pass the 125 increase and leave the rest of the language the way it is, and then we'll decide later in the fall about whether or not you can attach that 125 to renovictions or not, because I think that's the big magic bullet and the leverage that the city needs in order to squeeze more welfare rate units from the owners and from the province. So I'm also thinking of Abul Abdullahi, the owner of the Clifton Hotel, who came here in council in November, and he pleaded with you to not charge him the conversion fee. So with no conversion fee, you don't have a lot of leverage over him or other owners, and you'd have so much more leverage with that conversion fee applied to renovictions, and you'd get more rooms at welfare rate. So
Time, so if you can wind up.
okay, just if I had more time, I'd tell you about how the city's lack of enforcement of the standards of maintenance is leading to some renovictions.
You have questions, so you may have that opportunity.
Okay.
Councillor Carr.
Thanks very much, Madam Chair. Okay, lack of enforcement of the standards of maintenance bylaws leading to renovictions?
Yes. So one way that the owners are getting away with kicking people out and raising rents is by letting the places deteriorate until the city demands substantial work that would require the tenants to get out. The Clifton, the Burns Block, the American Hotel, the North Star, others, all of these places, the owners drove these places into the ground, refused to do major repairs, and eventually their buildings were closed. If the city enforced the maintenance bylaws more strictly, this would be less likely to happen. And in my experience, from what I've seen, inspectors they have low standards for low-income buildings. So a few weeks ago, Councillor Stevenson made the case that since no landlords have been taken to court by the city, this must mean that the repairs are happening. I can take you on a tour any day to a hotel, a number of hotels, and show you dozens of violations on any given day in almost every hotel. The Regent Hotel has 0 maintenance violations. According to the rental standards database. You could come take a look there. And I think we have a Regent Hotel tenant that's going to talk a little bit more about that. So renovictions could be prevented by increasing the maintenance standards in these buildings. And the way to do this is to threaten to do major structural repairs like plumbing systems. And when the owner says he can't pay, then you just say the next option is they could get professional RTB governed management in their building. Instead, you've got that power under the standards of maintenance to do the repairs, threaten to do the repairs. You need to use that tool in some of these places so they don't get driven into the ground. And then if you had the conversion fee in place for renovictions, then those landlords won't be able to sell their buildings, because if they sell their buildings, the new people coming in will go, wow, I can't renovict this place for other tenants. So then people have to rally to fix the building up for the tenants that are living there now. And that's what our goal is. So that's how it's complicated what's happening in the community, and we're getting our head around it. And we're trying to make it simple for everybody to understand. But we need to put our heads to this and do more work on it before you make a bunch of decisions that could unfold really quickly.
Thank you. Okay, I will ask about the plans, staff's plans around ramping up the standards of maintenance bylaw, inspections, etc. But back to a couple of points that you raised, Ms. Peterson. One is you asked, as other speakers have, for 100%. If there's grants that are given for renovations, 100% of the rooms afterwards should rent at the welfare rate. What we've heard at this council table is it's not possible to do that economically because 375 is so low. I think we all agree in this room. 375 is so low. It's way too low to enable an ongoing maintenance fund to keep those rooms in good repair. So we're caught in a catch-22 at the city level. And what would you advise us to do? I mean, we all know we need to go to the provincial government and federal governments and ask for more money, ask for more support around this. But do we just let those places not be renovated? If we require the 375 rent, the 100% at shelter rate rents, that it just might, no renovations might happen. I mean, where's your solution on that?
I agree that SROs require more money in order to operate them, and you need more than $375 a month as an owner to operate your building. So there needs to be a package that's offered to owners, and they also need to feel a penalty so that they'll have to take it. And the only penalty that we can think of is that the renovation fee, the conversion fee needs to be applied. If that big stick is holding over their head and they know they can't get rid of these tenants, they're going to have to work and hustle hard to make it work with the tenants that they've got. And the owners and the city could go to the province and say, look, we need some subsidy. This is not going to work. We can't accept only a third of the tenants coming back at welfare rate. We need to have these rooms as they could be shelters. And you have to use some math with the province. Right now, they're spending over $2,000 a month per shelter bed. So why would they do that when they can actually put some money into properties which are better than shelters, because you get your own room with your own 4 walls and a bathroom down the hall. So and also just the cost. Remember that old study that the province did that said that it costs $55,000 to have somebody homeless compared to $35,000 if they're housed. So you got to use some of those numbers, those logic, and get the business community on board. So I think otherwise you're going to end up with only a third of the people in
Just
potentially.
a second to ask you another question.
Yeah.
You're actually out of time. Sorry,
Okay,
Councilor
sorry.
Carr. Thank you very much. Those are your questions.
Okay.
Next, we have Sid Tan, followed by Jennifer O'Keefe. Mr. Tan here? There you are. Welcome.
Hello, I'd like to acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of the Coast Salish people, and happy to be here. My name is Sid Tan, and I'd like to thank councillors for the opportunity to address you on the SROs, which are very important because, as we know, that is the final line usually to homelessness. And homelessness has been a part of the ruling party's, Vision Vancouver's, attempt to end homelessness without success, from what I can gather. And so now we are to the SROs, and as the SRO bylaws came up, I was trying to ask myself, of course, having run for Vancouver Council and not being successful, what's this with the SROs? What's going on here? For me, being the kind of person I am, what's the weasel? What's happening here? Why is council actually taking an interest in SROs, the last line to homelessness, which is something that they have not done very well? So I tried to put that behind me, and I asked myself, you know, some of these things are pretty good. I have to take it that council is well-intentioned. And let's move forward that way, that what you are trying to do is well-intentioned to battle the last line to homelessness. I would put it to council, though, that SROs are the first step towards stability in homes. I have some experiential knowledge in this because pre and post Expo, I lived off and on for 10 years in an SRO, the Maywa Hotel. I currently have some knowledge because I live in an SRO now. The home that I was living in, the house that I was living in, that I rented for 17 years, was sold at the end of May, and I had to find housing, and that housing was an SRO, was owned by the parents of a friend of mine, and I was recommended to go there, and I thought, well, what the heck, let's try walking the walk before doing the talk, which is something that I always try and do. And so I went down, and I live at the SRO, which is quite different from the way that I used to live. It's more difficult, and I can tell you that I think most people who have been reno-evicted and ending up in an SRO will tell you that it's really quite an experience. So I don't want to go into that experience. All I want to say is that not all SRO owners are bad or greedy. That there are some people that are actually trying to create homes. And I'm here to say that when I moved into this SRO, I expected all kinds of things, and a lot of them have come true. And in terms of the bylaws that are going on now, that we are discussing. I would echo Gene Swanson, Fraser Stewart, Wendy Peterson, and others that are saying, what is the hurry? I think that the one thing that is missing in this conversation is that SRO tenants are just getting organized. And I think there's a need for City Council to listen to SROs and to give SRO tenants an opportunity to organize. And I think that you should put some resources there. I think that it's really important because it is the first step towards stability in housing, that it should be seen that way. It should be seen as a progression, not just some kind of a housing. We have these numbers, we have these numbers, we have these numbers. These are real lives of people that are trying to live in one of the most unaffordable cities in the world. The SROs are our ground zero of what life is going to be in Vancouver for many people.
Okay, that is your time. Do you have a closing comment, or was that your closing comment?
I think my feeling is that we need to find a way to help those SRO owners that really mean well.
Okay, thank you very much. You do have questions from Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And in fact, Mr. Tan, the last point you just made was one that I wanted to question you about when you said also that not all SRO owners are bad. There's some very good ones, well-meaning ones. When we passed at Council yesterday a number of proposals to support renovations in SROs, I know that the end result was 1/3 of the rooms were at shelter rate, but I looked very carefully at what the prices were at some of the others, and the three societies that we looked at were all committed to as deeply affordable rents as possible. So some were $400, many were with rent supplements. I mean, they were really working hard to get at as affordable units as possible. And so is that, in your mind, a good alternative or an acceptable alternative to 100% of the units being rented at shelter rate?
I think the work should be towards creating units at shelter rates, since we are living with the shelter rate, which neither the City of Vancouver can really do anything about. It's a provincial matter. And I think that the province and the federal government need to step in here. Like I recognize to a great extent the City of Vancouver's hands are tied. That's there. Now you ask me, is it one or the other? Is kind of like, do I like oranges or do I like apples better? I like them both.
Yeah. That's good, because it is a dilemma. There's no doubt it's a dilemma, and well, I mean, the preferable thing is probably the pineapple that isn't $375 a month at shelter rate, but some decent amount and some decent housing with money coming from federal and provincial governments for it. And I get that point that you're making. Just to be clear, if we can, and our staff work hard to try and find the rent supplements that support people, which does aid those nonprofit societies or those societies that are trying to offer this housing, that at least is an orange. It may not be the apple, but it can work.
Still fruit.
Got it. All right. My second question is around the point that you made about, well, it was really a question. You said, what's the hurry? Why don't we take some time? I will ask staff that question, but what if the answer is that that putting these bylaw changes in place will stop renovictions more than would occur if we delayed for several months? And so I'll ask that, but what in your mind? I mean, if there is that sort of quid pro quo, and if so, is there any way that you can envision some ongoing communications and work on this that would still say pass the bylaw changes, but work in these areas? Like this isn't good enough yet, and we need to continue the work in these particular areas.
I think that as you said, continue the work. But you have to remember, we are at a stage now that was built by a previous stage to a previous stage. We didn't get here just all of a sudden. A number of things have led here. When you ask this question, the question I keep on asking myself is, how did renovictions become part of the jargon of what we're talking about? Like, what is renoviction before all this is happening? It's just where you talk about investors, others can talk about renovictors. How does renovictors, language is so important. That's why I'm saying that while SROs are the last line towards homelessness, I want the city, and if we're going to move forward and get a hold of SRO tenants, to understand that SROs are the first line in getting stable housing, in getting your life together in terms of housing. And we need to approach it that way instead of just with a bunch of numbers, like how do we make life better for people that are living in SROs? And maybe some of it has got to do with landlords who are actually trying to help these people have a better life. I know that the particular landlord I have doesn't have to be doing what he's doing. He could sell that building and yes, maybe the $125,000 over all these units might have something to do with it. But at the end of the day, he's still going to have a shitload of money, and why is he running this? These are things that one of the reasons why I actually moved into the building, because I wanted to get to know this guy better, because it just seems like it's quite amazing what he's doing. I produced a film where he was in it and talked about being a paper son and what his struggle was in Canada, being illegal and doing all this stuff. And he has hit what would be called the immigrant dream. And part of that dream is how does he share what he has? And the way I think he's doing it is the only way he knows how to do it because of the way he's lived. And I think that if the city or some other people were to show some leadership on maybe how this landlord could create livable, good SROs with the help of the city and maybe the province and the federal government, I think that would be a bigger plus than trying to batter all the bad SRO people who are going to do what they're going to do anyhow. They're going to find the weasel. They're going to try and find some way around
Mr. Tan, that's...
whatever it is to make that extra dollar, the greedy bastards. So,
Councillor Carr's well over her time, but hang on, you've got more questions from Councillor DiGenova.
I just had a question. Thank you very much for coming. I think you pose a very interesting argument, something that I had thought about when I first read the report and back to some of the decisions that we made earlier in the year and late last year regarding SROs. The guidelines, the fines, the $125,000, yes, they're there to protect certain people and to make sure that the core need retains the house and that we help to retain that housing. But you also pose the argument that this can create hardship for people who may want to create a 2-bedroom instead of having a single room occupancy, who may want to create affordable rents or other types of housing, and that's something we've looked forward to. And I just recently put forward a motion about different types of affordable housing. We're not doing micro suites and so on and so forth. So I try and look at this as a holistic approach, the bigger picture here. So we are doing this in a sense to prevent the slumlords, but do you think, I guess what we have to sit here and weigh is, would a fine like this and would the proposal that staff have worked so hard on do more to help or to hinder? And don't you feel that this fine would actually help to retain the number of units that we have? I'm just wondering.
Well, my understanding is from what I've seen, and I don't spend a lot of time looking at all this. I spend most of my time trying to sort of figure out how to make life better for myself and other people. And part of that is I listen to people like Gene Swanson and Wendy Peterson and Fraser Stewart, who have the experiential knowledge of what it's like to build housing and to work with people that are marginalized. And from what I can tell, they're asking for just a little more time, and probably more importantly is a consultation or a get-together of finding out what SRO tenants think about all this.
Just a follow-up to that. A follow-up would be, in that amount of time, without these fines, which would be certainly much harsher than anything the city has imposed in the past, we could be losing these units, and that's what I'm hearing from our staff. So how much time, and would that not, in a sense, encourage those who are not, as you said, trying to do the right thing or trying to provide affordable housing? Wouldn't they say, okay, I have 3 months, I'm going to get rid of them all? Pay the $15,000 so I don't have to pay $125,000. That's my concern sitting here. And would you be concerned about that as well?
I'd be concerned about that. 125 is a lot better than 15, and then you have to ask yourself, why is that 15 there? Why did you start at 15? My understanding is that San Francisco's at 200,000 for conversions. And then, of course, the argument that's made is that most of these evictions in terms of the conversion are done way before this is going to happen anyhow. I mean, the people that are buying these places, from what I understand, are actually trying to get rid of people. Okay. So I don't know. It's very complicated, as it said. It's very complicated, and I don't pretend to have the answers. All I know is that I have one particular situation, and I'm just wondering why something can't be done to help.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Councilor DiGenova. Thank you, Mr. Tan. Those were all of your questions. All right, our next speaker is Jennifer O'Keefe, followed by Caitlin Siglo.
When I addressed Council last fall, I brought to your attention that there had been several bylaws passed by previous councils years ago furnishing the city with the wherewithal to force slum landlords to meet minimum health standards, thus no need for any new bylaws. Housing advocates have been calling on the city to enforce these bylaws for decades. Why hasn't that happened? The present mayor and his fellow councillors have previously engaged in redefining what homelessness is and isn't, and have recently partaken in the redefinition of low-cost housing. As CCAP announced, unfortunately, the homeless count this year is not that much better than last year, 1,803 to 1,746. And next year, the city is only expecting 45 new units for homeless people to open up. The city opened up 157 units at the Quality Inn to house homeless campers from Oppenheimer Tent City, but it will be closing next year. Let's do the math. 1,746 plus 157 minus 45 projected new units equals an increase in homelessness to 858. So basically, despite attempts to redefine homelessness and social housing, and the homeless rate count continues to rise. Include another 300 SRO units lost to development, like what happened last year, and the homeless rate hits 2,158. This is not governance. This is not representation, unless you're a developer or a condo king. This isn't even ineptitude. This is pure indifference towards the people you were elected to represent. The fine won't apply to landlords, as they actually have to be removed from the SRA bylaws. Of course, there are a number of actions that the city can take that will improve this situation. First and foremost, the city could actually make affordable housing an actual priority rather than a mere election item. The city could, for example, assume the role of the developer instead of depending on the private system and individuals to meet criteria for low-income housing. The city could explore zoning for affordable housing and not the kind where the other 70% of the units are market rate. The city could institute rent controls and ban rent evictions. The city could enforce the laws and bylaws already in place to force landlords and owners of rental properties to adhere to the health standards that are currently law. The city could and should be innovative when it comes to what city lands and which city buildings might be utilized for housing right now. The city could engage neighborhoods and communities to help find solutions, although this would only be useful if the city actually listened to and sought community-based solutions. Otherwise, such inclusion is nothing more than a facade. We are not reinventing the wheel here. COPE campaigned for these solutions all through the election. We have an affordable housing crisis precipitated by an artificially inflated real estate market. While 50% of us rent, only about 3% of our housing is designated social. Other cities in the world, such as Stockholm or Vienna, have anywhere from 30 to 80% social housing, owned and maintained by the municipality. Let's face it, a $10,000 fine for being homeless is not a practical approach to reducing homelessness. The city has had bylaws for nearly 60 years, giving them full power to enforce changes to places of lodgings, hotels, SROs, etc. But they have ignored these bylaws and instead recently claimed new and improved bylaws now give them the powers that they have had since 1956. It should be evident to all that Vision Vancouver is suffering from a myopia with regard to affordable housing and the plight of the homeless. The mayor pledged to end homelessness. Instead, it has risen to the highest numbers in city history. Vision Vancouver is completely unconcerned with the affordable housing crisis, and their lack of focus on the issue is quite frankly unacceptable. We are all citizens. The residents of Vancouver are being ignored in favor of the developers who bankroll their campaigns. This is not a mayor and council of the few for the people. It is a cabal of the few for the few. That Vision has broken their promises to the working poor and the homeless after proceeding to vote themselves raises. Unfortunately, it doesn't stop there. Think about that. They're rewarding themselves despite their obvious failures, while in the surrounding streets, homeless numbers continue to skyrocket. Worse, BC Housing is at risk of losing its existing social housing as the operating agreements for these providers will expire in 2020. It is paramount to bear in mind that what we view as problems such as homelessness and the greater issue of affordable housing are in fact simply challenges, and that the solutions to these challenges are neither mysterious nor beyond our capabilities. All that is required is the desire to find solutions and the willingness to act. Homelessness is not confined to a neighborhood. It affects us all.
Okay, that's your
regardless of
time.
whether
Thank you very much.
property owners or
Our
not.
next speaker is Caitlin Sigalo, followed by Jacob Sussman. Thank you. Welcome.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for being open to discuss this issue of housing and for hearing our opinions today. And thank you for your thoughtful efforts so far to decrease homelessness in my neighborhood. I moved into downtown Eastside a year ago, and I have been tuned into the voices of my neighbors since then. And I'm here today to echo a lot of what we've heard so far about the urgency of the housing situation in my neighborhood. Thank you for releasing helpful statistics earlier this month from the homelessness count. We saw, as was just mentioned, 1,746 homeless this year. And although it did decrease a little bit from last year, it's still the second highest and the second worst that it's been. And we're worried that this decrease will not be a trend. We lost 300 SRO units last year, and as we've heard, SRO units are an essential landing ground, the last stop before homelessness. This year we will lose the 157 rooms at the Quality Inn. And next year we project to lose in total 457 units, and there's only a projected addition of 45 new units. So we anticipate an all-time high homelessness count next year. So something does need to be done now, and I'm grateful for the sense of urgency that I do hear in the room, and I think we need to act under that, understanding that this is an urgent issue. So thank you for your attention to the SRA bylaw as a solution, and for your efforts to hold landlords accountable to keeping SROs affordable. As mentioned, we cannot afford to lose any more of these units. And so we are concerned that the changes to the bylaw will not bring about the changes that we are all hoping to see and could make matters worse. So I was really grateful for Wendy Peterson's challenge to put ourselves in the developer's shoes or the landlord's shoes, because they are going to look around how can we get around this bylaw. And I think that's what the general consensus of the asks are today is let's look at all of the angles of this bylaw to fully understand what loopholes are we leaving for others to be able to find and jump through. And we don't want to leave those loopholes, and that's why we're asking for really careful consideration of all the implications of this bylaw. So I agree with the voices of the SRO Coalition and CCAP so far of this ask to just carefully consider, especially with the changes in the definition to the conversion and with this new clause that was added to the addition of the $125,000 fee, the clause that this fee only applies when they are being converted out of the parameters of the SRA bylaw. We fear that that won't stop the Stephen Lippman and the rent evictions that are happening. So yeah, I would echo these concerns and ask you to take careful consideration as you've mentioned the urgency that we do need to deal with this now. Maybe a solution is implementing the fee, but let's not rush to pass this bylaw so that we can say it's over and done with and see how things fall out. Let's actually take careful consideration and continue working with this bylaw to ensure that loopholes are not found and that rent evictions will end in Vancouver. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You don't have any questions. Thanks for coming today. Next we have Caitlin, or sorry, that was Caitlin. Next we have Jacob Sussman, followed by Mohammed Valiati. Welcome.
Hi. Hello, council members and speakers. Sorry, my printer's broken, so I'm going to be speaking off a screen here. I'm a male cisgender queer voice. I'm a guest in Vancouver. I've resided here for 6 years, three generations earlier. My ancestors immigrated to Canada from Jewish communities in Russia and Poland, as well as England and Germany. So in the long history of this land, my lineage has only been here for a really tiny blink of time. Vancouver is positioned on unceded Coast Salish territory. This is a truth which this council formally acknowledged last summer, and many folks like myself and other council members who do not have First Nations ancestry by this acknowledgement are all guests on this land. Today, Vancouver City Council, a settler government, will make decisions which directly affect who can and who cannot continue to live on this land, and I hope the irony of this power dynamic is self-evident. I don't live in an SRO, and I expect most council members do not live in an SRO. I hope today folks in this privileged position will listen and learn from those who have been living in an SRO. Based on the speeches that we've heard here today and other conversations that have been held prior to today, I believe the problems surrounding our endangered low-income housing stock are more complicated and intricate than can be addressed by today's policy changes. A $125,000 penalty may act as a disincentive against upgrades which displace tenants and remove units from the SRO stock. Unfortunately, we have seen many instances where the current $15,000 penalty is not enforced, and I imagine it will be disappointing to see what exceptions could continue to be made for owners wishing to avoid a $125,000 penalty in the future. Will there be safeguards to ensure owners actually consistently pay? Regardless, as the CCAP has documented, owners and managers use a wide variety of other strategies to remove tenants, including intimidation tactics, abuses of power and capital, and neglect of maintenance. In addition, we must take Council's recent and imaginative redefinition of what constitutes social housing, which includes now buildings with 70% market rate housing units. Given the nebulousness of this definition, we're faced with a bizarre situation in which a unit can increase in price beyond what remains affordable for those of us who rely on welfare or disability income to pay rents, and despite these increases, still be considered a part of the social housing stock. Given the tremendous demand pressures on Vancouver's housing stock, it will be important for our council to implement equally imaginative policies which not only help to secure our dwindling supply of SROs, but also ensure that existing SRO units remain an affordable form of housing for those of us experiencing economic precarity. Looking at the policy, I find it potentially hypocritical that a statement on health and mental health in particular is included in this policy. I wonder whether the council has heard of the Housing First strategy developed and outlined by Pathways for Housing. Under Housing First, folks who are struggling with mental illness and addiction receive stable housing first and foremost, regardless of levels of treatment compliance. Numerous researchers have shown that after this crucial housing need is met, mental health and addictions interventions are significantly more successful than those which proceed in the absence of housing. And I can send council members some examples of any of this research if you would like. It should be self-evident. It takes a huge amount of outside support and personal effort for us to address our own mental health issues and addiction issues in the best of circumstances. This task becomes infinitely more difficult when facing homelessness, landlord abuse, as well as discrimination rooted in classism, ableism, sexism, racism, transphobia, and homophobia from owners and managers, and also folks within the healthcare system. I want to name these specific forms of oppression because homelessness continues to disproportionately affect people who are women, people who are disabled, people of color, trans folks, and queer folks, something especially important to consider at the upcoming Vancouver Pride events, where city officials often use the rhetoric of everyone belongs in our city as a self-congratulatory adulation. Is this the reality for everyone? No. The bottom line, if City Council is concerned about the health and mental health of downtown Eastside residents, Council will absolutely need to secure more affordable housing than what is currently available, and also give tenants more concrete support, perhaps in the form of dedicated housing advocates and more of them. Certainly a poster about places you can contact in the event that you are rent evicted will not be doing enough to help people. To proceed with health interventions in the absence of sufficient housing supports will prove costly and also ineffective. And it will also, I believe, alienate residents further from a system that many people have understandably lost trust in. Please continue to listen to the stories presented today. Many speakers are showing tremendous courage in risking retaliation from landlords, and nonetheless, they are here speaking to you. The homelessness crisis in Vancouver is imminent, and it is complex. Please look to CAP, members of the downtown Eastside, residents, other community organizations for more thorough recommendations for how we can fight homelessness more effectively and attempt to tackle the fuller scope of the problem. Thank you.
Well timed. Thank you very much. You don't have any questions today. Our next speaker is Mohammed Valayati, followed by Ashleen Wartenweiler. Welcome.
Good morning. My name is Mohammed Valayati, and I actually lived and worked in these SROs. And I came to agree with my friends that these SROs now kind of hosting a variety of people with a mental problem, people with old age problem, well, old age, and people on the way to being a homelessness, or people when they're getting out of the homelessness, they using these SROs to continue fight for the life anyway. And I'm not against the renovation of these buildings because these buildings are really old. And some of them are just falling apart in their own. And but renovating and increasing the rent it will make it less accessible for a population who already live in there. So I would like to see the city allow more, I like the form of advocacy that the SRO Collaborative doing. They're doing some outreach to these units and people living there, helping them to ask landlord for some repairs and other form of advocacy, of course. And to make another point, I don't like to be rushed to change any SRA bylaw because this is a very good tools for people who live in an SRO. I've seen people want monetary fund from landlords, and people do get compensation according to these bylaws. So these bylaws are good, and changing to them should be considered spending more time to studying them than changing it. And that's it. I don't know.
Thank you very much for coming today. You don't have any questions. Our next speaker is Ashleen Wartenweiler, followed by Adam J. Welcome.
Good morning, councillors. As a mother in the downtown east side, I was struck from the report by the young people outgrowing foster care who end up homeless. I've seen them, and I've seen the destructive effect of years, even months, on the streets. By getting them housing first, all their supports and money invested in youth programs will actually be worth something. And this is true for everyone, not just young people. Housing is a prerequisite for safety, rest, belonging, a place to call home, which many of us take for granted because none of us have been homeless. The very livelihood of individuals suffering homelessness makes this problem an urgent one to address. The longer they are homeless, the more the problems are compounded and the more money it ends up costing the city. I plead with you to make social and affordable housing your top priority financially and politically. To offer at the same time mental, emotional, and psychological stability to these residents of Vancouver and essentially save their lives by making physical and mental health possible. We can't rely on the private market, which is creating this crisis. It's a market that gives the advantage to those resourced with personal connections, finances, education, and technology. Because the market so greatly disfavors people who are homeless, lacking these resources, we need the intervention of our government to advocate for and protect its residents clearly and strongly. Looking at the SRA bylaw amendments, I encourage the city to take an even stronger stand than what's been proposed. Tenants need to be guaranteed an affordable rent. In some cases, no rent increase can be tolerated, regardless of whether they're required to temporarily relocate or not. Also, we cannot allow rent evictors to escape the proposed $125,000 fee, which they may do by not taking units out of the SRA bylaw. There must be penalties for private owners who evict people through tactics equivalent to bullying, which has been referred to earlier in earlier speeches. In order to actually end street homelessness, which I believe the City of Vancouver can accomplish if it is taken seriously, strong proactive measures need to be implemented in the people's favor. So thank you for starting this process. I do believe it's just a start. So what needs to be done? Well, I'm asking City Council today to please not hesitate to charge the owners the conversion penalty fee of $125,000 per unit for rent evictions, which can include a repair, improvement, or replacement that has a material effect. Please make a formal proposal to the province for funds for social housing. This provincial money can help the city buy enough lots to build housing for 3 to 8 years from now. It could fund almost 1,400 units on city-owned land. So please continue planning ahead. Please lobby for more federal provincial funding of social housing using contractors and developers who would build it. We need to keep up a stream of thousands of units of social housing a year in BC because there's continuously new people becoming homeless. Also, please continue and step up the lobby for higher welfare rates. They are not high enough for rent and healthy, nutritious food. Please look again at your definition of social housing. Acknowledge that any units above the welfare rate, even if just slightly, are unaffordable to homeless people. So these cannot be counted as affordable housing. Even $50 more is not affordable. The city should put together a strong lobby case for more social housing using contractors and developers who would buy it and lobby the feds and province for more money to keep up a stream of thousands of units. Oh, I've said that already. I apologize. Please enforce the city's maintenance bylaws more strictly, with more than one inspection a year so that hotels don't deteriorate to the point of needing substantial renovations that end up forcing tenants out. The tenant's livelihood is not improved if living conditions are not conducive for creating homes. And this is one that I strongly want to ask the city to look at, the enforcement. I personally know lots of tenants that are left to themselves to try and get just simple basic repairs. And having housing does not mean they have a home. If the city makes a deal with Van City, please do not allow a grant to be issued to an owner unless rent stays affordable for people on welfare and disability. The stipulation must be part of that deal, so no portion of rooms are lost, but that all rooms are kept under rent control. Pursue a variety of solutions. This is another one that I plead. We need diversity of options in addressing homelessness so that people have a choice, so that their dignity can be restored. Each individual who is homeless has a different story with different needs. So please continue thinking creatively into various strategies. And also please listen to people on the ground. They can be trusted and they may actually know more than we do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You don't have any questions today. Next up, we have Adam J., followed by Jack Gates. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Adam J. And right now I'm homeless and I don't have a fixed address. And I used to live in one of the low-income house and SROs. I used to live in, I like to say the name, but I saw my previous landlord in the back, and I have a little story about that. I know I only have 5 minutes, but I had one of the worst experience living in the Lucky Lodge. And I guess you all know who owns Lucky Lodge. And the Regent is, and I lived there for about a few months, and I used to work at the front desk so I can have a reduction in my rent. But I wasn't getting paid properly, so what happens is I got evicted. I was intimidated, actually. and all my belonging and everything was taken. And I was harassed by thugs who was sent by the landlord. So I just, if you're gonna put 150,000 for these conversions and all these things that is happening right now, I think we should have a more policy to punish these landlords and to make them accountable. I know the real estate is increasing. The downtown east side right now is a prime real estate, but we need to have consideration for the people who live there. And when I lived in a lucky lodge, and my place was invested with bed bugs, cockroach, eaten by mice. I didn't have a door for the first 1 month, and I was told the door is coming. Can you imagine living in a place with no door, no washrooms, barely working, and it was a horrific condition. And so what I'm trying to say is let's not give all the leverage to the landlords. And these people are really, slumlords, and they're leeching on, they're making money on the people who really live on the bottom. And if you say that, I used to remember 20 years ago when the rent used to be $230, and right now it's $375. I know they're trying to increase the rent, but I mean, how we get only what, $600-700 a month if we pay rent, and we don't have enough money to go by. So what do? Panhandle, shoplift. What's the solution? I mean, you guys are sitting in front of me. You guys know about this problem for a long time. You haven't done anything. I mean, please don't cave into these slumlords. Try to be fair. I know the rent is low, but let's make some solutions for the homelessness and the drug problems are related to each other. And finally, I just want to thank Mr. Jung regarding giving me a blanket 2 years ago in front of the United Church. And I really needed that blanket. So thank you for coming to the community. I don't see the rest. I don't see Mr. Raymond Louis, but I do see you. You do come. I'm thankful. And you also gave me a tent, and you also gave me a sleeping bag. It was very useful. That was in the winter time. So I just want to say thank you for that. And I slept in the park for about a year. And then I went to Victoria and I slept in the park for about another year. I got actually sick from hypothermia, and I was in a hospital for about 3 months because I was in a coma because I had pneumonia from sleeping. And can you imagine how many ticket police I have from the transit police and from the Vancouver police and from the Victoria police? A lot. And the judge told me, I told the judge I can't pay that, but I just want to thank you, everybody, and hopefully we can find a solution to this problem. And thank you.
Thank you for coming out today, Mr. J. Our next and final speaker is Jack Gates. Welcome.
Yes.
Can the clerk help out with this, please?
Hi.
Welcome. And we can probably get that going while he starts speaking. Okay, why don't you go ahead and start and we'll get the photos up.
My name is Jack Gates. I too have a couple of friends that were going to show up too today, and they were worried about physical harm, so I'm not here just for them. I'm here for all the tenants in the Regional Hotel and any SRO that is run down. My name is Jack Gates. I live at the Regional Hotel. I lived there for about a year. There are 150 rooms in this hotel. The Regent is in bad shape, really in bad shape. It could easily be condemned. Investors who could renovate it or renovict it aren't there. Well, I don't know. A few weeks ago, Councillor Stevenson said that there must be no problem in the hotels because there has been no cases where the city took the landlord to court for repairs. The city says there are no problems at the Regent Hotel on their website. I want to know some. I want to show some photos actually of some of the really bad things in the hotel. It should be really condemned, but this photo here. Sorry, I took these in May and June of this year. This is a leaking ceiling in room 300. There are lots of problems like this in people's rooms. This is what garbage looks like in the hallways at any given day. It's like this every day. More garbage, filthy bathtubs that are broken, garbage in the well on any given day, stairwells, and in between the buildings and that. Mold and leaks in the bathrooms, open needle boxes in the hallways, never locked, just thrown in the garbage after a while. Rat feces behind this guy's closet is a rat that lives in his closet. Some people have rats living in their mattresses. Broken windows where people crawl out of the bathroom into the stairwell, and in between the buildings. They climb out, and there are windows on the first floor, many of them which are broken. This guy uses a toaster oven to heat up his room because there is no heat. Tenants get their doors taken off when the landlord wants them to do something. Giant holes in the walls for easy rat access. Broken taps in the tubs in many bathrooms. Why is this happening? I think management in the city are to blame. The tenants for the hotel I think the management and the city try to blame the tenants for the hotel's conditions. And in my opinion, the management is at fault because of the maintenance. Maintenance is so low. People don't care about much. If it is fixed up, people will try to take care of it better. It's also easy to complain. I was talking to management about fixing things up, but nothing was happening. I'm getting a few things done because of the SRO collaborative. I would like to see all the maintenance property done properly. Need proper maintenance workers. We need someone who doesn't live in the building who will do the job properly. They are hiring from inside the building, pay $5 for 2 or 3 floors to be cleaned by them, and then the rest are left. The cleaning doesn't happen every day. They offered they offered to do some maintenance work and offered to pay me in drugs. I'm not a drug addict, and I don't drink. I don't even smoke cigarettes.
Your time is wrapping up. If you could finish up, that would be great.
Okay. I just want the city to throw the book at these guys, force the owners to do major renovations, or the city should do some repairs and bill them for the costs. If the owners don't want to do the route do that route, go that route, then tell them to get the professional management to take over the buildings.
Hey, Councillor Stevenson has some questions for you.
Yes.
Thanks very much for coming in. Hello, over here.
Yes.
Thanks very much for coming in. and for your remarks, but you're the second person to say that I said something to the degree that there was no problems in SROs. Where did you get that quote? Was that in a newspaper, or where I don't recall.
Okay,
I certainly
first,
don't even believe that, but
first of all, this is what I've heard.
where would you get those? Was it out of a newspaper quote or something?
Was
Point
that
of order, Councilor DiGenova? Hang on just a moment. What is your point of order?
Speaker, that they don't ever have to answer any of council's questions.
Thank you for that reminder. Yes, you are not required to answer that question.
Okay.
You don't know? No.
No.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Councilor Stevenson. Those are all of our speakers. Thank you very much for everyone coming out today. I will now entertain follow-up questions to staff based on what you have heard here today. If you have any questions for staff, now would be a good time to get on the queue. Councilor Carr.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I guess first there'll be an answer to the question I asked beforehand.
Yes, you asked about whether we could further describe a permanent resident in relation to the rent or the type of welfare that they were receiving.
Or low income.
Or low income. So after consultation with our lawyer, the authority given to us for the SRA bylaw comes from the Charter, and it's the ability for us to designate rooms. The authority is not to designate the occupants of the rooms. So the city can regulate rents and some of those issues through a housing agreement, but we cannot simply impose those other conditions through the bylaw.
So we couldn't add permanent residents of low income. We couldn't say of low income.
Because the permanent resident definition defines them as an occupant, so it defines the fact that they're living in its relation to occupancy of the room rather than a description of the person.
So we just don't have that ability. Okay, thanks. Conversion fee. The conversion fee has been raised by several people, $125,000. It's required if the room ceases to be designated under the SRA bylaw. I've talked about this before, but or if it's not replaced, I'm going to suggest an amendment to this to say add by the owner, and we've talked over that.
Yeah.
How does a room cease to be designated under the bylaw? I think people are interested in that.
So that would be if an owner is replacing a room, if a non-profit is replacing a room. So when we say replacement, that means replacement with social housing. In that instance, we are not going to be recommending charging a fee because the ability for the owner we want all of that investment, all of that ability to be focused on the replacement units. That's where reaching our policy goals through our Downtown Eastside Local Area Plan. If an owner wants to remove themselves of the bylaw and is not wanting to replace those units, that's when we'll be coming to council and we may recommend the incursion of the fee.
It's all about replacement.
Yeah.
Are there problems if we delay the decision to later for more consultation? And when I think of problems, I'm thinking in terms of loss of rooms, conversions, renovations, etc.
Obviously, staff are bringing forward these recommendations based on a request by council from last November. Council can, of course, ask us to defer any of the recommendations that we're making today. However, from our perspective, I think we do feel a sense of urgency about this need to clarify and expand the description around conversion. We heard from many speakers very eloquently, I think, the challenges around renoviction, and our expansion and further description of minor repairs as a conversion gives us an additional degree of oversight and visibility into some of those situations than we would have had previously. So that's why we're recommending the change. Will it absolutely stop every instance of renoviction? I'm certain that's not the case. However, we would now, because this SRA permit is a requirement under those circumstances, we're now bringing that authority to bear, and if someone is in breach of that, doesn't get the permit, we can now exert a penalty around that. We can take them to court. There are further things that we can do that we would otherwise not have been able to do.
And there's an urgent basis to bring that in.
There are a number of hotels, as we've seen, which are in
severe state of disrepair. Our enforcement team, we're working all the time to encourage landlords to make renovations and make repairs. And so that combination with this new change gives us that oversight that we wouldn't otherwise have had, specifically around the tenant relocation side, which is obviously
I've got
our
a couple of
concerns.
questions, and I appreciate your answers. The city has provincially owned social housing that's being sold. Are we working with the province to ensure that the money from those sales is being reinvested into social housing in the city?
Yes, we're working with the province on a number of projects, a number of proposals around new social housing in the city. We see a number of applicants either directly with the province or drawing on the applicants themselves are going to the province to ask them to put money into their social housing development. So we see a number of conversations happening, and I'm assuming that a large amount of that is due to the fact that the province now has this additional money potentially coming into its back to it.
And in terms of the speakers raising the issue around 1/3 of the housing only at welfare rate, other 2/3, how are staff working to ensure the affordability of the other 2/3 of the housing that would be renovated?
As we've seen recently, we have the mandate of nonprofit housing providers is really to maximize the level of affordability, so we're seeing most success there. However, with some private providers who are interested, and we've heard again today that not all private operators are, there's differences of different types of operators, and so we've been working with those operators both to secure certain rents at 375, but also secure access to units if we can match those individuals with a rent subsidy, so access to those units through our outreach teams. And that's a very important shift and change, because often there's been the argument that just because a room is available at 375, it's still not being made available to people who are in receipt of income assistance.
Thank you so
That's
much.
all of your time, Councillor Carr. Councillor Ball.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you very much for the report and for all the work that's gone into it. I'm wondering, looking at the photographs we've just seen with our last speaker, which are worse in person, bad enough looking at the photographs. I'm wondering whether, what does this help you to be able to do to actually do something about the Dickensian sort of horror of that, even just getting rid of the garbage? What could the city do now with this policy that we couldn't do before? Is there something that can happen urgently looking at these buildings? What are our actual powers?
Well, maybe I'll make a couple of points and then I might turn it over to our colleagues in enforcement.
Thank you.
So clearly we've been working with our enforcement team, and these changes enable us greater oversight around some of those minor repairs. So issues that arise in the building that may result in tenants needing to be relocated, that gives us great insight and oversight into the buildings. I think it provides an impetus for us to work even harder and even more strongly with our enforcement colleagues to make sure that standards in these buildings are improved. And it gives us the opportunity to work with advocates, the SRO Collaborative, with other organizations who are working to support tenants in this environment.
Good morning, Andrea Toma in Licensing and Inspections. We are continuously working with the building owners and their operators in terms of the maintenance issues. Some of the challenges with the enforcement in SRAs is that it's an ongoing problem. We do yearly inspections, and we have come a long way with the rental database. And we're at a point where we go back for reinspection, and even though some of the enforcement issues have been dealt with, there's typical ones pop up, things like paint on the walls and things like that. The buildings themselves are aging, and there needs to be some more work put into it. And I believe with the operators on site and the managers, they're working towards fixing the issues, but also putting resources forward. For example, I know on the Regent, we're asking for 2 building managers rather than 1 to ensure that when they do the cleanup and when the garbage is removed, that they don't let it pile up so that they're attacking the issues a lot faster. So it's an ongoing process, but we are working and we've made extreme progress from a couple of years ago.
So there's somebody, in essence, there now trying to do something about this issue?
Correct.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ball. Councillor Jang.
Oh, there we go. Thanks very much. Question for our staff, a couple of them. So just to be clear, we're dealing with privately owned stock and not publicly owned stock. So many of the things people are asking for, the speakers, we have no jurisdiction or power to do. It's largely provincial, and what we're trying to do in this bylaw is to create some rules around the privately owned ones where we don't fetter private property rights, if you like, in order to meet our social policy goals. Is that correct?
We're certainly, Council is asking us continually to review the SRA bylaw and to make changes to push it as far as we can in terms of the protection of the stock and the situation for tenants, to go much further and to really address the issues, some of the issues that have been raised, specifically around rent-evictions. It will require provincial action regarding the Residential Tenancy Act, I think, and that's why staff have also included that as a recommendation in this report.
Oh, that's good. Okay, just wanted to make sure that was clear here, that I wish we could do more, but we're quite fettered by our land use rules, and that's about all we have. Now, if I remember correctly, we have an SRO task force. Is that still in existence?
It's not currently. We provided the final report and kind of wrapped up that process around and kind of inserted that into the Downtown East Side Local Area Plan report back. We are in contact, obviously, as I mentioned, with some of the tenant advocates who are working in the area and with a number of the housing providers and obviously BC Housing. But we don't specifically have a SRO task force at this point.
Okay, but just to reassure me that we're continually talking to a very wide range of people and providers and agencies and individuals in the entire area.
Yeah. These are very complex issues, and it requires kind of comprehensive action on our part as a city, cross-departmental action, but also action across many different types of stakeholders. So Vancouver Coastal Health around the kinds of supports, health supports they're putting into the SROs, with BC Housing about their rent supplement program, with our outreach team. As Andrea indicated, it's an ongoing effort, ongoing work to kind of bring all of that work together and make it effective.
So it's more effective than yet another roundtable, or, I mean, they have their uses, task forces and things like that, but I mean, what I'm trying to get at is to make sure that task forces are good for specific problems as I see it, and you bring in, the most immediate. But because housing issues are so complex in the area, we need a wide range and the freedom to talk to whomever we need to, as opposed to simply always be fettered by possibly fettered by membership on a task force or something along those lines.
In the run-up to bringing these recommendations forward, obviously we talked to a number of stakeholders, and I think subject to Council's decision today, moving into an implementation phase, we may be speaking to a slightly different group of people to make sure that our implementation is effective. So depending on what stage of work we're at, we'll definitely shift and change the stakeholders at the table.
The last question has to do, again, it's sort of the question I raised earlier about the guidelines. So are we actively working on some guidelines now to define comparable and things like that?
Yeah, we certainly welcome the questions that we had last time. We looked at some of the information that was provided, and we're also in the process of working on changes to our rental housing ODP, again, as a request of Council, looking to strengthen tenant relocations, tenant rights across the board in all rental housing. So those pieces of work fit very well together, and we'll be looking at them alongside each other.
Great, okay, and that we're taking best practices from around the world. I know there was some stuff sent up from the United States that could be included as guidelines for you guys to refer to.
Yep, there's some very interesting work being done both in Canada and also in the US, particularly Los Angeles, that wasn't mentioned today, is a city that we're currently looking at.
Okay, and again, it's about finding, I'm just trying to capture the complexity of it. Everybody has a solution, and they're all very slices of the pie. But what I'm sensing from staff is that you need a little flexibility in order to capitalize on opportunities that come up, taking different slices of the pie here and there. It may not, we can't all think up. It's like sort of the Japanese at Midway. They tried to war game out every scenario, how the U.S. fleet would attack them, and they missed one. We're wiped out. Is that this is what I'm worried about, right?
Well, certainly since I've been here and working with the team, many of whom have been here right from the start in relation to the SRA bylaw, it certainly appears to me that no application, no building is ever exactly the same as ones that you've seen. There's always something that's slightly different, be that the owner, the tenants, the financial situation, the condition of the building, some nuance in ownership. So to be clear and to set expectations, but at the same time provide sufficient flexibility that we can really negotiate and influence the best outcome. That's the balance that we're always striking to achieve.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Jang. Councillor Reimer.
Thank you, Ms. Vaughn. Had a couple of issues. I know you've canvassed some of it. Others have canvassed points of it, but I sort of wanted to more directly ask the question. So, I mean, there are maintenance issues, and we've had many processes and discussions about that. But the issue in SROs really comes down to ability to afford. So there's the income, which I think Mr. Tan pointed out, the city has very little control over the income side. And then there's the rent rates, which also happen to fall into provincial jurisdiction. There were some suggestions, however, from speakers around tying the Van City grants to a rent rate or other. I have a list, but I managed to misplace it in my pile of paper here. So can you speak to what is possible for us to do, given that it's in provincial jurisdiction?
I think anytime the city is using a housing agreement, so that is often a condition of a permit. When we're using a housing agreement, we're able to set conditions in that permit around, and so that's how we would implement many of the changes that we're seeing today. So depending on whether you're doing repairs or whether you're replacing the unit or exiting the bylaw, for those first two, you would anticipate seeing a housing agreement securing those conditions. And when we do that, that's when we're securing the first right of refusal, on the right to come back on a similar rent, those kinds of things. That's where we would see kind of, if you like, the control around rents. For grants, again, as you saw yesterday at council, when the city is giving maybe one of our $5,000 a door grant, that's again where we can set conditions around the affordability levels. We are working with partners to try and set up a grant, or not just a grant, but maybe a loan fund as well for private owners. This is really the last gap that we see in relation to funding. And of course, we would be looking to maximize conditions. We would be looking to make whatever money we're able to lever out of our $2 million, we'd be looking for other organizations to bring that money and to kind of combine to make our public policy goals work together. So yes, we would be looking to put conditions on that money to better meet the goals that we see in the plan and that council has.
Okay, and then the question of, I think Ms. Peterson raised the idea that tenants in that we make it a condition that tenants in buildings that we've given grants to or the housing agreements exist have a lease in place, like a legally enforceable lease. Is that doable within the housing agreement?
So to require that all tenants have a legally enforceable tenancy agreement.
Yes.
I believe that's already a condition in the SRA bylaw, but I'm just going to confirm that. I will confirm that in a moment, yeah.
Okay, I'd be interested to know that as well as how we would enforce that, given that the agreement is between the provincial government essentially and the landlord.
Yeah, I wonder whether it's to do with the permanent resident nature. So a permanent resident must be living longer than 30 days, and the way that we would know that is if they had a tenancy agreement that was a month-to-month tenancy agreement.
Okay, whatever you can provide on that, I would be interested in. A question about if we were to move ahead with these, how do you monitor the impacts? How do you anticipate? There's been a variety of opinions on whether or not this would help. Yeah, a spectrum of ideas on that.
Because of the nature of the changes, they're quite wide-ranging. Certainly the changes around the expansion of the conversion to include minor repairs is going to require us to do some significant implementation work across departments, so with our permitting staff and also with our enforcement team as well. So I can anticipate a working group of staff coming together to implement those changes and also monitor the impacts. And we have ongoing monitoring for our SROs. We do a biannual SRO survey, and so we can look to also include questions or do extra qualitative work to find out the impact of that. Plus, obviously, we're very keen to hear directly from the tenants themselves, their advocates. We, yesterday, Council approved the Homelessness Action Week grant, which includes a tenant convention coming up later this year. And so that's an opportunity for staff to meet with tenants and hear directly about their experiences.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Reimer. Councillor DeGenova is next.
I just have a few questions. Thank you very much. And thank you to staff for bringing back these new recommendations. I know that you spent a lot of time on the first report and now on the second as well. Just some questions that arose from some of the comments of the speakers, and that was regarding the conversion fee of the $125,000. There's some speakers that feel that perhaps we're moving too quickly with this and that this should be, referred. And currently I understand that the conversion rate is $15,000. So would we be concerned and would staff be concerned that if after this meeting today this was referred, that there would be a number of people who saw $15,000 as a good deal as opposed to $125,000 and we would lose this much needed housing stock?
It's hard to anticipate how people would respond to action or the deferral of the report, but yeah, there is obviously that concern that that is such a big shift in the fee that we would see applications in the interim. I think Madam City Manager has something to add.
Thanks very much, Madam Chair and Council. I think the issue of delay can probably be dealt with, Councillor, if Council chooses to make a decision on this today. We are obviously monitoring this very, very closely, and we have put into place, a number of transactions that owners will have to do so that any minor repair, they will have to come and get permitted. That has not been the case, up to now. That doesn't necessarily mean we will immediately get alignment with that, but we will be pushing that very, very hard. And I think that these are issues that can come back and be adjusted and nuanced. We will have a very tight evaluation on a real-time basis of how this is working, and if there are anticipated impacts, some of which I think our speakers have very legitimately raised as concerns. We don't know, but this could happen. That has been very, very helpful for us. It's in the scope of some of the things that we have been thinking about, but we need to monitor because there is no perfect solution. So my sense would be, our recommendation would be for Council to move ahead with this. We will very tightly monitor it and come back and signal to you if we have any concerns at any point in time that they arise.
Okay, thank you. A follow-up to that, though, is it within our scope as a council, if, for instance, this was referred, as per the speaker's comments, to hold anyone who was to apply after today for that to the $125,000, or would they still only be subject to the $15,000 conversion rate?
Well, my understanding, and I'm not certain, we would have to check this, but we can get that checked, is that there are only certain situations where the charter allows us to grandmother or grandfather somebody in, and I believe the bylaw would have to be enacted for us to apply the higher rate, so that anybody who gets in the door before would have the right to come in at the lower rate.
Thank you. Just a few more questions. And one of those questions are, it is very much a catch-22 here. We're looking at certain landlords, and I think that one of our speakers said it quite well, that, there are the few that really are trying to make sure that, they provide a decent living environment, and perhaps they're not in the majority. But do you see this in any way hindering them wanting to make repairs and renovations to their units? What will the city be doing to communicate with them that they will not be in danger of a conversion fee if they want to make upgrades, so that the pictures that we saw earlier aren't the state that we see many of these units in?
Thank you, Councillor. So we will be communicating with owners about the changes subject to Council's approval. We were very mindful in bringing forward the recommendations and expanding that definition to include minor repairs, that we didn't want to disincentivize landlords and owners who are genuinely trying to invest in their buildings. So we have delegated that ability for the SRA permit to the Chief Housing Officer in order to speed that up. So if there's minor work that needs to happen in response either to our enforcement action or otherwise, that permit can be issued quickly.
And then just one more quick question I have, and that's we're talking a lot about fees, or what I would call fines. What are we doing to incentivize? You know, what are the incentives here for people either building new housing in the area? I understand under the DEODP that it's 60% social housing. There are a number of developers who just wouldn't think that was worth their headache. What are we doing as a city to make sure that there are incentives for new development or renovations in this area to make sure that we improve the livability of these SRAs?
So as part of the Downtown Eastside Local Area Plan, the city, we're offering $5,000 a door for improvements to SRO rooms, and we've seen some significant interest. Obviously, we've now had 3 applications from nonprofits. We want to expand that, so we've indicated today in the report to expand some kind of grant or loan program to private owners in similar situations, and working with partners to try and do that. The city, we have our own grants of $10,000, $20,000 and $30,000 per door for new social housing, which we fund through our capital plan. And we've had significant number of interest and inquiries from nonprofits, from private owners in the Downtown Eastside and elsewhere as a result of new community plans to develop social housing and take advantage of the increases in density that the city is offering in exchange for delivery of public policy goals.
Thank you for clarifying that.
That's your time. Thank you very much. On to Councillor Jang. You have more questions?
No, since if there's no other questions, I'd be happy to move the bylaw amendments with an additional change.
And I'll just confirm with Councillor Carr, did you have further questions?
No, mine's
Okay, then we'll continue with the motion. Councillor Jang.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I'd like to move the bylaw amendments as presented by staff with one small addition, and that is E. Whoops, wait till it gets up there. Yeah, we need to clean up that garbage. Okay, so it's as staff has presented A, B, C, D. My amendment is the inclusion of that, an annual report on the status of SROs to include any new standards of maintenance issues, any increase in average room rents, and any loss of welfare rates be presented to council. I think that's prudent in the sense that it provides us with an ongoing check-in of how things are working out. And shouldn't be too onerous for staff. I know they collect this data all the time. I was contemplating quarterly or something like that, but that might be a bit much. They're nodding their head, yes. But I think an annual report to see how this rolls out, I think would be very informative for council and the public to see how these changes might work. I considered thinking about making the delay that some of the folks are asking for today, but hearing the explanation from our city manager and staff against that, and the very fact that just yesterday, as I raised, the very thought of having these new bylaws in place has already resulted in some new rooms, and that's significant. There's an empty building and it's creating more. And guaranteeing, not all of the rooms, but certainly a number, and it makes everyone whole. Everyone has to remember that these are privately owned buildings, and that we're quite limited to what we can do. And as our staff clearly pointed out, it's going to take work of the provincial government under the Residential Tenancy Act to actually bring about some of the changes people have asked us for. But I believe our staff have worked very hard and has pushed the envelope on this one, and I'm happy to support it. Thank you very much.
Just for clarification, in E, is it meant to be any loss of rooms at welfare rates?
Correct.
Can we have that?
Oh yeah, any loss of rooms at welfare rate.
So that is the motion on the floor. Thank you, Councillor Jang. We will now continue to Councillor Carr for debate.
Yes, thanks, Madam Chair. I to have some amendments to this motion, and thank Councillor Jang for moving it. And my amendments I've sent to staff. They'll have to be changed in terms of order, so my E, F, G, and H are now F, G, H, and I. Okay. And if we can just add one other wording in the I, that council directs staff to continue to consult with residents. And could you add the words "and other stakeholders"? Thank you. So in summary, first of all, I just want to thank staff for their work on this and for all the residents and the people who came to speak to this incredibly important issue. And for your ongoing conversations and information that you've supplied. There's no doubt that there is very good work that's progressing on this, and I'm very pleased. I know that my motion in December was one that prompted this work, and I really thank you for engaging on this so solidly. And let's face it, there is huge urgency. We all feel it. There's urgency around the state of disrepair. The rental allowances are insufficient, which is in the province's hands to allow landlords to keep places in a state of repair. There's rent evictions. There's conversions going on. I mean, we are in a crisis around low-income housing and the SROs in particular in this city. My amendments, number one, have a change around the term by the owner of a unit in the conversion section of this bylaw. I wanted to make very clear that a conversion fee will be applied unless there is a unit that replaces the unit that's being converted, unless there is a replacement SRO unit built by the owner, not built by anybody else, but built by the owner. Otherwise, that $125,000 applies. My other amendments are clearly pointed at the fact that we cannot solve this problem on our own. Every speaker spoke to, not every, but many speakers spoke to the need for us as a city to continue to lobby heavily, the federal and the provincial governments. So I have one addition which asks us to continue working on an urgent basis to secure new low-income housing in the city. And diligently, and I know our staff have worked on this, but we cannot ever let up. We have to push on that. The third is to use the opportunity of the October 2015 federal election to advocate as a city, and I implore every councillor to work on that through agencies like FCM, which I know Councillor Louis has taken not only as the leader now in terms of president, but I know that there is real concerted effort on the part of the FCM on this. But I think as individuals we can play our role too on this. And that finally, I really heard the desire for more consultation, more ongoing work on ensuring that not just the SRA bylaw, but other city tools are strengthened, their efficacy continuously evaluated and focused on. So I think there's been some incredibly good conversations that have been had around the development of these changes to the SRA bylaw, and I'd like to see those continue. So those are my changes. I'm supporting this motion now because I believe that there is an urgency, and I am worried that in the gap of time, if we don't do this now, that we will lose. We will lose opportunities. There will be more rent evictions. And there are tools within this bylaw that do better protect residents and better protect affordability, including the $125,000 fee, which if there is a conversion can be used to actually build, for the city to build replacement rooms. And those particular advantages in this bylaw are worthy of this bylaw being passed now.
Okay, Councillor Carr, I'm going to move us to an amendment queue. It may well be friendly, but we'll move officially to the amendment queue. And Councillor Reimer, is that a holdover or are you? Okay, if you want to move an amendment to the amendment, then get on the queue. There you are. You are now on, I'm going to move us to an amendment queue 2. Because you want to move an amendment to the amendment. So push the button again. Councillor DiGenova, an amendment to the amendment.
I've just sent this over to the clerk. First of all, I'd like to thank Councillor Carr for her amendments, and I think that the amendment to the amendment will only complement this, and it would be under H. It currently reads the council use the opportunity of, I'm sorry, it's supposed to, it's supposed to be under G. Supposed to be under G. That the City of Vancouver continue to work on an urgent basis with the provincial government to secure new low-income housing in Vancouver instead of in Vancouver to meet the needs of Vancouver. And the reason for that is I believe that Vancouver is certainly a leader in providing housing, and there are people who choose to and want to live in the downtown east side and call that their neighborhood or in Vancouver, but there are also people who are forced to live here because there aren't affordable opportunities in other municipalities that they called home. So I think that we should be, as a leader, working with the provincial government to make sure that, yes, we're providing housing in Vancouver, but also in working with other municipalities to provide low-income housing there as well.
Okay, thank you. Before we discuss that amendment, I need a motion to extend. I'm going to suggest that we extend to finish this item and hear the presentation on the Burrard Street Bridge, which I understand to be about 20 minutes long. So would someone like to move that?
So moved.
Second, all in favor? Any opposed? All right, so we will finish this item and do the Burrard Street Bridge presentation. I don't see anyone on the queue to debate your amendment. Oh, there, Councillor Reimer, to the amendment to the amendment.
Not a debate. I'm just trying to understand when Councillor DiGenova says Vancouver, does she mean the capital city of Vancouver, the residents of Vancouver, I'm just trying to understand.
Vancouver.
Okay.
The City of Vancouver? Yes. Yes. I'll accept that as friend.
Okay. Councillor DiGenova, do you want to speak it clearly for the clerk, please?
To meet the needs of the housing goals of the City of Vancouver.
That's it. We got it. All right. Councillor Reimer.
I'm confused. I don't want to create a case where, God help us, that the province finally decides it's worth acting on this and they don't understand what you meant. So perhaps we could say to meet the housing goals of the City of Vancouver. Okay, great.
Right. Another friendly amendment to the friendly amendment to the, I guess we'll let you do that because it's your own motion. All right, so that is the amendment to the amendment as it stands. Any further debate on the amendment to the amendment? Seeing none, I will move us to a voting queue. Please hit. To do it myself too. I'm a little bit slow here. Okay. Councillor Ball is not in the room. Okay, so the vote is done, and we have 8 in favor and none opposed, so that passes. We are now back to the amendment. Get us back in the right queue. The amendment queue. Councillor DiGenova, you've spoken to the amendment. Do you have anything else to say to the amendment as amended?
No, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Okay. Would anyone else like to speak to the amendment as amended? Councillor Jang.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I was working furiously here with Councillor Carr on getting the wording just right. I think, would it be acceptable to Councillor Carr in under G, no, hold on now, H, instead of, I don't really like the word low-income housing because it suggests then we're just going to build more SROs or something, right? What we would like to see is something along the lines of, I don't think we had time to put it in, advocate for more money and a national housing program. Because I think we have to address the spectrum of housing because the spectrum does line up from low-income shelter rate, homeless people, all the way straight through. Because we're the only country that does not have a national housing program, and that is put in terms of how we can say this to the federal government in terms they understand. Because everybody's been advocating for a national housing program which covers the spectrum of housing.
Sorry,
I don't know.
I will put my,
I got you.
you got me? Thank you. Thank you so much.
done.
Well, since it's my amendment, if I can change it, I would be fine with saying that council use the opportunity of the October 25th federal election to advocate for a national housing program and for more money to support low-income
Residents.
low-income housing in Vancouver.
Okay, that's fine.
Right.
All right. I normally wouldn't allow this, but I will allow you to amend your own amendment since
Thank you so much,
on the
Madam
table, and
Chair.
we don't need to go back to the queue. So Councillor Jang, you're good
I'm good, thank you.
on the amendment? Councillor Louis, to the amendment as amended.
I'm just trying to make sense of the amendments with the amended amendment. Council used the opportunity of the October 20 to advocate for a national growth housing program.
No, a national,
So,
national housing program.
national housing program
Motion by committee, this is what
to
happens.
advocate for a national housing program
And for,
and for more money and support. So there's a lot of ands in there. I'm trying to.
yes, true enough.
If we're going to communicate this to the federal government, I expect that we should have proper language. This is the flaw of on the fly, on the amendments where they aren't probably written out prior to submission. So,
And I would not like to see the word low-income struck if that's what that is. Yeah, I'd like that yes, thank you.
might I suggest, Madam Chair,
Low-income, keep it.
that council use the opportunity in the October 15th federal election to advocate for a national housing program to meet the housing goals of the City of Vancouver and strike the rest, rather than referencing money, low-income housing, but we have housing goals. We have established housing goals in the City of Vancouver, and it matches up with what we have just discussed and passed unanimously under G. And so a national housing program which meets the needs, to meet the housing goals of the City of Vancouver.
Since it's grammatical and the mover is not
I'm amenable.
assertion, then I'm not going to make us go through another amendment to the amendment queue, and that wording stands as the amendment as amended.
Okay.
Anything further to the amendment?
And striking the rest of that, Madam Clerk? Yeah.
Are you now good with the amendment to the
Certainly
amendment?
that makes it clearer in my mind of what it is that we're supporting. I'm clear on what our housing goals, because we've developed them with the assistance of staff, and we know what, based on much research and effort to develop them. And this, the housing program, a national housing program, which is something that we've been advocating at the FCM for, and certainly asking for significant support from all political parties is in line.
Okay.
So just on the point of Councillor Carr's earlier, which was that there are initiatives underway to advocate to the federal parties. It is, I think, important for all of council, not just the official spokesperson at the FCM, which happens in this case to be myself, to speak with the party leaders, but to take the opportunity to speak to all of our elected and prospectively electeds at this next federal election. If you have not taken the opportunity yet, and I expect that there's a couple here, to sign the petition that is online for you to sign it through the FCM, and encouraging not just the elected, but all of our citizens to go onto the Federation of Canadian Municipalities website, learn about the roadmap that we've produced that will give some guidance in what we believe are important for local governments across our nation, for Canadians as a whole, and to join us in that petition. Hopefully council will support that. That would be right in line with what we're discussing today as one component at the very least. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Louis. Councillor Carr, to the amendment as amended. I think you've spoken. You spoke for a full 5 minutes already to the amendment.
Yes, I just wanted an opportunity to speak in the end. I don't need to I mean.
You spoke to the amendment. You spoke You started the amendments and then spoke for 5 minutes, so I'll let you speak briefly again back to the main motion as amended.
At the main motion, that's when I'll do it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Reimer, to the amendment as amended.
That's the red and green text, yes? I'm getting that right? Yep, okay. Well, so just to say that GH and I are ongoing work of the city. We've passed many motions intersecting and relating to those, so I supported them then, I continue to support them now. But I did want to point to F, because that really is the new piece of work around the comparable housing. And to thank the SRO Collaborative, who did quite a bit of research around looking at other jurisdictions, San Francisco notably, and the definitions that they had, and to thank them for bringing it to Councillor Carr's and mine attention, and Councillor Jang and Carr have been busy working on it over there, so that's great. I'm glad we're not trying to, it's one thing to massage language around advocacy that's been approved many times on the floor of council. Massaging comparable housing would have been a big challenge, so I appreciate everyone's efforts to make sure that it's being moved forward without creating new problems because of a last-minute language issue.
Thank you, Councillor Reimer. That's all the speakers we have on the amendment as amended, so I'll move us to the voting queue for that. We're voting on the amendment as amended. Okay. We have finished that vote. 8 in favor, none opposed. That passes unanimously. Thank you very much. We are now going to go back to running the queue up here. The main motion queue. Councillor Carr, you were on there with your amendment, so we'll advance you to the main motion. Councillor Reimer.
Yep, I had some comments on the main motion. I did first and foremost want to thank the speakers. In addition to the just logistics challenges of last meeting, this meeting, a long process in advance of that. I do understand the vulnerability of coming and speaking when you are in precarious housing, so I appreciate that. And also to say that my own perception is that both Metro Van Alliance and SRO Collaborative, I can see the echoes of the increased organizing. Like it is making a difference to have those connections in community. So I appreciate that. There were two main messages I heard from the speakers. One was, what's the hurry? And the second was a detailed outline of the urgency of the issue, which is reasonable because there is an urgency and there is legitimate concern that a precarious housing situation could be made more precarious. It's sometimes about the devil you know and not the devil you don't. Since December 2008, the very first council meeting with Mayor Robertson in the chair, Councillor Stevenson brought forward an action on SROs around taking action on the standards of maintenance bylaws and slumlords. Since then, we average about a motion a quarter relating to standards of maintenance, to advocacy, to planning, to provincial government advocacy, to the Housing and Homelessness Action Plan. And each and every year have taken significant steps, including, I think we were all very moved in 2011, those of us that were on council, by the Wonder and Palace Rooms hearing, where we decided at that point that the approach that we had been taking had to be ramped up quite significantly with the establishment of the SRO task force at that time, and that really was the direct line and genesis of the report before us today. There was a bit of a pathway because we subsequently in 2012 established a downtown east side plan, and we had to merge that work together. I think more accurately, staff had to do the difficult work of merging that together, but certainly in 2014 when we passed in March 2014 when we passed the downtown east side plan, we also put in there advocacy, much more substantial advocacy actually than is referenced here on the issue of SROs and the need to move on the rate issue, because that really is the question. We keep trying to find ways to work around something that ultimately needs to be worked directly with the provincial government on. They are the ones that provide the welfare rate. They are the ones that set or have the ability to set the room rates. And the gap that people are falling through is created directly as a result of their lack of action in that area. So I will say that I do believe that the need is urgent. I felt that way in 2008 and every subsequent year that we've worked to move this issue forward. I thank Councillor Carr for getting on board in December 2014 with the motion on the Clifton rooms, and Councillor DeGenova, because that, of course, has added some urgency to the issue. I have to note, though, that 50% of the homeless count this March, 50% had been on the streets for only a year. It's the first time we've seen that kind of startling number of a year on the streets, which is a combination of aging out of care, but also being forced out of SRO. So I heard the voices of those that were concerned that this may create new challenges. I have to admit that I cannot give you a 100% guarantee that it won't, but I feel enough confidence, and I know for sure that if we don't take action, that number in the homeless count will only continue to rise next year. So monitoring is quite critical, so I appreciate Councillor Jang putting that in. And I will say again that partnership is critical. One of the speakers, Mr. Fraser Stewart, referenced the pipeline issue. I would say that there are two critical differences. On the pipelines, we have a united front on the issue with the community that is aligned on that position. It doesn't mean that we agree on everything and every issue. It means on that issue of the urgent need to take action, we agree. And I think we need to get to that place on the housing issue if we're going to be successful with the provincial government and federal government. And the second is that there is a process to directly engage with the federal government. Well, okay, let me reframe that. An inadequate process that allows us through a variety of blind alleys to engage with the NEB that eventually could lead us to engagement with the federal government. But success is going to take finding a way that we can create that kind of partnership on this critical and urgent issue, that we do find that basis of unity, and we are able to create that process that allows us to finally directly engage with the province and the federal government on this issue.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Reimer. Councillor Carr, to the motion as amended.
Yes, thanks, Madam Chair. Well, again, I want to thank everyone who came here to speak and all those who wrote into us. And many of the stories of your situations were heart-wrenching and eye-opening and very important in terms of directing council and this city's direction on the issue. And again, I want to thank staff for their hard work on this, not just on these particular changes, but on an ongoing basis. I know that staff are very passionate about the work they're doing, and it's very hard work, case-by-case basis in some cases, to actually find and secure a rent supplement for someone that can make the difference between being housed and not being housed. I want to thank also Councillor Jang for his work on this, and also his particular amendment. That amendment speaks so importantly to the community work as well. CCAP has been doing this kind of monitoring, and those reports have been the kind of catalyst, I think, for recognizing around this council table the absolute urgency of the situation. Without CCAP's work, looking at it, everything that's listed in that particular amendment in terms of the loss of rooms, the loss of affordability, the rent evictions, etc., that you wouldn't see that here in the city incorporating that into its ongoing action plans. Finally, I just want to say that this situation is. This bylaw will move forward the situation positively, and it's not going to on its own solve the situation. It is such an intransigent and difficult situation that the city can't handle on its own. That's why I felt it was important to signal that we have to keep working at the federal and the provincial levels as well. It's in partnership with those other levels of government that we can truly get at the solutions that we need. And until then, use every tool we have to try and improve the situation, better the situation, and protect residents, increase the affordability of the housing, protect that stock of the rooms that, I love Sitan's comment that may be the last line before homelessness, but the first line in terms of secure, affordable housing.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Councillor Stevenson.
Thank you very much. First, of course, I would like to thank staff for this report. It's been a huge amount of work, obviously, and it will affect many, many people's lives. Obviously, this is not the total answer to the issue, but we've been working on this as long as I've been on council, and it's been step by step and improvement by improvement. Sometimes I wish that there would be some acknowledgement that there have been huge changes and improvements, but I do understand that people live very difficult lives, often in the downtown east side, and sometimes it's hard to see that. I was a bit perplexed by a couple of the speakers bringing up what they felt were quotes that I had made, and obviously I know very well the problems that are in the downtown east side, and I've been working on them for a long time. So I'm not sure where that came from, but I think it was probably taken out of context of some sort. It was why I was trying to push to see where that might have been. However, I'm very pleased with this report. I think this bylaw will make a big difference and will improve the lives of people in the downtown east side. I also want to thank Councillor Jang for the work that he's done, and also Councillor Carr for the amendments. I think they're also helpful. I have a sense that this is going to be a unanimous vote today, which is excellent. It couldn't be better, because we all know that this is one of the more difficult problems that we've had to solve, no matter which party has been. And we keep chipping away. And I think that this will be another big step forward. So thank you, Madam Chair, and I will definitely be voting in favor.
Thank you, Councillor Stevenson. Councillor DiGenova.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'd like to start by first thanking staff, not once but twice. I understand all of the hard work that has gone into this report, and when Council sent that back, thank you again for coming back to us with an even more thorough report, answering many of the questions that I know myself and some of my other councillors had. I think that this is a really interesting situation that we're faced with. We want to make sure that we're giving the necessary incentives to these landlords to provide improvements, but at the same time, we want to make sure that they understand that there will be a fee and a fine if they do remove the SROs, and that's something that we have been dealing with. Just to address some of the comments of the speakers today, I'd like to first thank Councillor Carr. I'm not sure that without the amendments to the main motion that I could have supported it the way that it was, although I very much appreciate the staff recommendations. I think that there are some huge concerns. I think that Sid Chow outlaid those very well when he said that there are certain landlords who wouldn't be classified as slumlords who actually do want to make changes. And as somebody who has worked with the vulnerable in providing nonprofit housing, working with developers and different municipalities, I know the difference that new linoleum flooring could make, or some new kitchen cupboards, ridding bed bugs from a building. And I want to make sure that we certainly aren't discouraging landlords from making these repairs that I'm not sure I would consider minor, but hopefully our staff do consider those small repairs or improvements as minor. That being said, I would also be concerned today that if we didn't pass this motion, that there would be a number of people who thought $15,000 was a great deal and they'd be getting rid of the rooms as quickly as possible before the fine went up to $125,000. I think that we have to be careful. We need to look forward. We need to be leaders here in engaging and participating with the province. It was very good news. I think it was great news to hear that our city staff meet with BC Housing weekly to work with them on some of the challenges that we face in rent supplements, in new housing, in making sure that we're improving the housing for people who, especially for people who are looking not only for affordable housing, but for sorry, I had some issues with my mic there, but for the core need. I think that there's huge challenges here and we're walking a bit of a tightrope. And I would encourage my fellow city councilors, instead of beating up on the province and, ministers and making it political, instead show the diplomacy and the leadership that we need to move forward with BC Housing. There are a number of things that BC Housing is doing to improve things. So before we just pat ourselves on the back, I think we need to look towards our partners and say that we're in this together. I also think that we need to consider in moving forward that it's small steps like this that I can support, that maybe they're not grand improvements that we can cut ribbons and call our own, but I find that this is a better solution than promising to end homelessness, which obviously, unfortunately some of my fellow city councilors did, and they fell short on their promises. So I'd rather take small steps that will change people's lives for the better, and I feel that staff have brought us a great recommendation that will indeed do that. So thank you very much. I will be supporting this.
Thank you, Councillor DiGenova. Councillor Louis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There is a significant amount of work that has been done in order to get us to this point. And I'm not speaking just of the report that we have before us, these changes that are coming as a result of these bylaw changes, but the work that has come through successive councils. And the pride that I have of sitting as a city councillor comes as a result of it being generally a nonpartisan issue that successive councils, dating back to 1997, when the request was made to the provincial government and granted by the provincial government to enable us the authority to take actions like we're doing today. It did take 6 years subsequent to that, 6 or 7 years subsequent to that, 2003, my first term on council, when we first enacted a bylaw. Councillor Stevenson was there as well, where we took the step and enacted a bylaw that we were hoping would help the situation, slow down the conversions, and subsequent to that, councils of the day needed to make further adjustments. You'll notice in the report, and I think it's quite instructive in the report, that there are periods of activity and there are periods of lesser activity, but there nonetheless has been some activity on every council. I can say with clear conscience that the councils under Mayor Robertson, where he made the pledge to attempt to eliminate street homelessness, there has been greater activity. And I challenge anyone to say that we have been ineffective. And so the innuendo that by making comments that we do not have a relationship with the provincial government or any government, and as a result of that has yielded lesser results, is false. And the facts will prove that out. And so comments are one thing, action is another, and I think that by us taking action, as this report indicates, we're taking further action, strengthening our SRA bylaw, and moving forward with this in a constructive way, we will in fact move this further along. I do say that there's much more work to be done, and our commitment of council, at least the majority, is to continue to put the resources in, and that's evident in our capital plan, and where there's monies allocated in that to address the issue of homelessness and housing within our city. I recall clearly that there was great consternation about that component of our capital plan during the election, and there was great consternation about oddly, during the campaign, that there not enough was being done, or more could be done. There's innovative practices that could be introduced. And so far, we haven't seen those innovative approaches or those words being translated into some form of motion by any of our opposition councillors. And I would say that here's an example where we've done the work, and it appears that we are moving forward with some minor amendments, I think, for further advocacy and some additional information being brought to us. But the substantive thrust of this report is that we are moving forward in a constructive way and in a meaningful way to address the challenges that we find out on our streets. So finally, we need to obviously have further funding. This is not a City of Vancouver only problem. This is not a City of Vancouver created situation, but rather it is a societal problem, and we do need to have the province and the federal government at the table. And if it means having a healthy tension with any order of government, any party, it means that we should have that healthy tension and make the point. And that's what this council has been doing. And so be not afraid to speak your mind. Be not afraid to stand up for those that cannot stand up for themselves. And for the sake of diplomacy, I'd say that that is the wrong path to take. That we should not hold our tongue when there are people on our streets. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Louis. Councillor Jang to close.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And first of all, I want to again thank our staff. It had been referred to by Councillor DeGenova, these moves was a small step. I want to say that this is a big step, and it's a gutsy step, and it really is. It builds upon a long history of trying to fix the downtown east side and get people in. So, kudos to all of you for taking such a big step and a gutsy one, because this was not easy. We here have, along with, this proposal and the enforcement of the standards of maintenance bylaw, we're making a difference, and it's showing, and it was acknowledged today by a number of the speakers. The staff proposal today is a good approach. It's a balanced approach. It deals with private property rights, but yet again looks at how we can actually create and maintain housing for the low-income community. It's another tool in our tool chest. It's a balance because it says to the good landlords, we will make sure you're going to be made whole. We're going to make sure you can look after your buildings. And it says to the low-income community, those who are low-income, that, we're creating spaces for you. We're creating new capacity. We did so yesterday. We did so yesterday with the threat of this bylaw with some of the private landlords. It also says to the bad landlords, look out. We're coming to get you, and if you're thinking about flipping those properties, buying and flipping them, you better think again, because that's just not going to happen. So the good landlords, we're going to help you, make sure you do the right thing, achieve what you need to do to make your buildings work. And says to the bad landlords, if you're intending on flipping these properties, think again, because it isn't really going to happen. It will make it so bloody difficult for you, it isn't going to work. So I want to thank staff again and all the speakers that came today, and for all my colleagues on council. And I just want to make it clear too that, I'm not the only one that goes to the downtown east side. That's absolutely false. Many of my colleagues here, in particular, the Vision Vancouver councillors and Councillor Carr as well from the Green Party, have all been down there working hard. I just happen to be giving out stuff that day, so and I do stand out because I wear a suit and a tie when I'm handing them out. I don't change. But even on the homeless count, we've seen very clearly that virtually all members of Vision Vancouver and the Green Party last time actually went and did the homeless count. We didn't see any NPA there at all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Jang. That completes the debate on this, and we will now move to the voting queue. Please register your votes. Councillor Stevens, okay. And it is 9 in favor, none opposed. That passes unanimously. Thank you, everybody. We have said that we will now do the Burrard Street Bridge presentation. We have a whole bunch of staff queued up for that, so we'll do that presentation, and then we'll take a lunch break and continue on with questions and speakers on Burrard Street Bridge. But we'll start with the presentation before our break. We are good to go. Mr. Dobivoni. Do we have the presentation up on the screen?
Thank you very much. My name is Jerry Dobivoni. I'm the Acting General Manager for Engineering Services, and I'm joined by our staff team and some of our consultant team that have been actively engaged in the Burrard Bridge project. So we're happy to bring that forward to council. I've got a short presentation we'll go through now. As you know, I'll just start with some of our high-level targets very quickly. As you know, our greenest city targets, our transportation 2040 targets are to grow our number of trips through walking, cycling, and transit. The 2020 target was to have more than half of our trips. We actually achieved that this year. And our 2040 target that we're now working towards is to have 2/3 of our trips by walking, cycling, and transit. The reason for that is to allow the growth in trips to take place, as you can see from that bar chart, and also accommodate those additional trips in a way that allows our road system to still stay functional. And that's the orange chart. The orange bar at the bottom shows the number of vehicle trips. So vehicle trips staying about the same, allowing the road network to stay efficient, effective, but accommodate that huge number of increased trips to keep our economy strong. Another key component of the 2040 plan was a zero fatality goal. And a key stat for us is that vulnerable road users, pedestrians, cyclists, and motorcyclists, while they're only involved in 3% of the collisions, with motor vehicle occupants making up 97% of the collisions, they account for 70% of the fatalities. So 3% of our road users account for 70% of the fatalities. And those are the two key targets and goals from the 2040 plan. 2040 plan also looked at the bridges in False Creek, the 3 bridges, identified that the downtown and Central Broadway are the 2 largest economic centers in the province. They're the 2 largest concentrations of population, and we know that there are a number of challenges for walkers and cyclists in crossing the bridges, and so that's a very important area for us to improve. So the key objectives for this Burrard Bridge project and the corridor was to make needed repairs to the bridge. It's an 83-year-old bridge, and the work that's needed at this time is railing, sidewalks, and light fixtures. Return walking to the east sidewalk, and I'll talk more about that, and also address some serious safety concerns at the intersection of Burrard and Pacific. At the same time, we want to maintain motor vehicle capacity across the bridge. It's an important car connection to the downtown. It's an important bus route to the downtown. It's an important truck route into the downtown. We also want to minimize construction impact by coordinating the utility work that's needed. The bridge is a very important heritage structure in the city, and we've worked hard to be aware of and try to respect the heritage value of the bridge, and also maintain accesses to businesses both during and after construction. So in terms of the overall scope of work, and I'll spend a little more time on this, but there's active safety improvements at the north intersection. There's a small section of widening, and I'll talk more about that, and the approach to the Burrard and Pacific intersection. For the main span of the bridge, the rehabilitation, there's a lane reallocation, and then a separate is utility work. There's needed water and sewer work on Burrard from 1st to 16th. There's also some on Burrard in the downtown. So we want to coordinate that utility work at the same time so not in twice, impacting traffic. So the required rehabilitation, we were in last year doing bearings and expansion joints. The current work is to repair and replace the handrails, the concrete handrails, lighting and electrical, sidewalk work, the soffits. There's electrical work and access improvements to the bridge. In terms of walking, as you may recall, when the separated bike lanes were in, we reallocated 1 lane of traffic that was southbound, but in the northbound direction, we reallocated the sidewalk to the separated bike lane, and we've heard lots of desire to try to reinstitute pedestrians to the east sidewalk of the bridge. And the safety improvements, the Burrard Pacific intersection is our second highest vehicle collision location in the city, and it's our highest, over the last 5 years, it's been our highest bike collision location. And this shows some of the movements. It's a complicated maneuver for vehicles entering onto the bridge, and there's stops and starts as they cross sidewalks and bike paths, and so we've seen a number of different types of collisions entering the bridge. The safety improvements are patterned after the Burrard-Cornwall intersection that's been very successful in terms of resolving those conflicts. And as far as we're aware, it's the only fully separated intersection in North America that's been built, and has recently won some awards as well. So in terms of the intersection itself, the existing condition has these on-ramps, these slip lanes, and that leads to a lot of the safety concerns in terms of high-speed entrance onto the bridge. So the work is to remove those channels, make it a more standard intersection with intersection and crossings at the corner. It involves creating protected crossings for the bikes and separate from the pedestrians, so the pedestrians and bikes aren't sharing the crosswalk. Adding some bike lanes in the approach to the bridge to make it easier for cyclists to access the bridge, and adding dual right turn lanes. This is the part that's key to maintaining capacity of the intersection, or increasing capacity of the intersection, maintaining the capacity of the bridge, is two right turn lanes onto Pacific and 2 right turn lanes from Pacific and onto the bridge. So the key part there is widening the northern approach. So in terms of the overall length of the bridge, the main span, the proposed widening is just at the north end and the approach to the intersection. And what that does is allows enough room for the required number of vehicles to queue up and be ready for when the right turn signal activates. Without that widening, we don't have enough space for the bridges to queue up, or we reduce the travel lanes. And as I said, the goal was to maintain capacity, which is what we're doing. I should point out that the reallocation of the one travel lane northbound for the length of the bridge does not impact capacity. The center span of the bridge is just a straight, free-flowing piece of roadway. It's the intersections at either end that control the capacity. And the Burrard-Cornwall intersection has already been rebuilt, and the design of the Burrard and Pacific intersection is done in such a way that it maintains the capacity. So what that looks like at the north end, this is the existing cross-section of the bridge. So for northbound, we have the bikes on what was formerly the sidewalk, a barrier, 3 lanes, 2 lanes. There's the reallocated bike lane in what was a travel lane, and then the sidewalk, which is 2-way pedestrians. So the proposed widening would be to cantilever out new sidewalks. The bikes would be located in a protected lane on what was originally the sidewalk, and then 6 lanes of vehicle. And these 2 lanes would be the right turning lanes, and then 2 lanes north, 2 lanes south. For the majority of the bridge through the span, it is a reintroduction of pedestrians to the sidewalk. So the barrier that's currently there would be removed, and there would be a new whoops, I didn't mean to do that. Can I get back? A new architecturally enhanced barrier that would be placed between the bikes and the vehicles, and that would allow the pedestrians to return to the east sidewalk. Through Transportation 2040, we had a very extensive consultation process, and the bridges, and Burrard Bridge in particular, were all part of that. We had over 50 groups involved in those consultation meetings, ongoing discussion with all the groups, including Vancouver Heritage Commission, going back as far as 2010 and 2013. In fact, I was just recalling that the Burrard Bridge was a key part of the 1997 transportation plan as well, so the conversations go back as far as that. And I'll talk very specifically about heritage at the end of the presentation. More recently, though, in the late spring, June of this year, we went back out with an engagement process. It involved both our regular meetings with all the various agencies, plus some more innovative events where we had lemonade stands on the bridge to catch pedestrians and cyclists, a gas station to talk to drivers that were in and out of the area, and a series of open houses. Received lots of feedback and on the design and on the process, and I'll talk in detail now about the top 4 items, and then quickly touch on some of the others as well, because we made adjustments to the recommendation based on some of that feedback. Again, motor vehicle capacity was one of the key concerns, and I'll stress now the design has been done such that it maintains capacity. So these bar charts are showing before and after travel times and the various different routes to and from the bridge. And in several cases, there's slight reductions. In a couple, there's a slight increase, but overall, the changes are less than a minute. In terms of cycling connections, there were concerns raised about eastbound cycling through the intersection, how that would be accommodated. And the movement would be that cyclists on Pacific would come and position themselves into this bike box here when they have the walk signal here across. They position themselves here and then cross with the green light with the vehicles flowing and back into a protected lane. Like the Burrard and Cornwall intersection, this redesign has pedestrians and bikes crossing on 3 legs of the intersections, pedestrian crosswalks on 3 legs. This section of the roadway basically has vehicles moving at all times, at all signals. So whether we have all signal phases, whether we have vehicles making right turns from Pacific, whether we have vehicles either going straight or turning right onto Pacific, or whether we have vehicles flowing through. Vehicles are always crossing this leg of the intersection. That's a key part of keeping the capacity maintained, and that's why there's no crosswalk at this intersection, similar to the Burrard-Cornwall intersection that does not have a crosswalk on the bridge side. Suicide prevention measures, the means prevention, is an important issue that was raised during our consultation process. So we've been aware of the issue of means prevention fencing for a number of years, and our thinking originally going through this process was that it could be a phase 1, phase 2. As we went through the consultation process, we received strong feedback that strong recommendation that is required as part of this initial work. Staff deliberated on that and agree, and that's why we've included this as a recommendation now to do this work at this time. So what that means is that there will be some type of fencing installed as a suicide prevention. That detailed design has not been done yet, and so that's work that we need to do moving forward to finalize exactly what that fencing looks like, how high it is, what the bar design. The actual type of design is still to be maintained. So when we went out to the public, we had artist renderings that looked like this, because our original thinking was that the fencing would come as a phase 2. Our recommendation to you today is this, that the fencing being done at this time, it needs to be done, and you'll hear more from speakers today stressing the importance of this work. So those were the top 4. Cost was raised as well. The fencing is an added budget item. Also, we have more refined budget estimates. We've been doing design for the past year. So the initial estimate that was in our capital plan was $30 million with refined budget estimates, and the addition of the fencing, the recommendation before you today is $35. The engagement process, I touched on that. We've had extensive conversations about this over the past decade, more specifically in the 2040 plan and most recently in June. And the consultation, I'll just maybe stress, we're using the word engagement as opposed to consultation, because a lot of the work is very complex and very technical. So I should be clear that when we went out to engage with the public and with the various agencies regarding the intersection design, it wasn't with a blank sheet of paper to say, so what do you think, and come back and draw up 5 different options and go back out. So sometimes our processes are consultative and very interactive and iterative. In this case, it's a very, very complex intersection. So we spent actually years doing that intersection design, and then did a touch base with the community to see what we had missed, and made some modifications, but it wasn't starting with a blank sheet of paper. The suicide prevention measures are similar to that, is that it's based on coroner's report and advice from our medical health officer. Construction impacts, we heard about construction impacts, and we actually asked a survey question: would you prefer to have a more impactful, more intense construction period that's a shorter duration, or would you rather that we stay to sort of typical hours and have a longer duration? And we receive feedback both from residents and businesses close to the bridge, as well as those that are farther away, that they prefer a concentrated, shorter duration overall, which is what our goal has been now. We're looking at options to see how we can shorten the overall construction period. It's estimated to be between 14 and 18 months, and we've identified some opportunities to maybe bring it in about 16 months. But once we go back to tender and receive the actual bids, we will ask, if council approves this, we will ask the firms bidding to provide us with options to do the work more quickly. Local impacts, there's a number of local impacts. We're still working through with some of the residents regarding that, but overall, we've maintained some really important parking on Burrard in front of some of those businesses. There was an issue around closure of a lane, and we're able to maintain that lane, keep it open. Southbound bus stop, we're able to move that bus stop closer to Pacific, and accessibility on the bridge is definitely being improved, and we're still working on some of the details in the detailed design. So the last main issue I want to cover is heritage. As I said, the bridge is a very, very important heritage structure in our city. We know that. It's treasured. And so right from the start, all of our discussions around heritage on the bridge have been, it's been recognized as a key factor. We have a multi-discipline consultant team that includes a well-respected heritage consultant that's been actively involved throughout the process. I'll walk through each of the different aspects, but really the key issue is the fencing that's come up. The sidewalk and the railings rehabilitation has been assessed. I should say there's a process that we follow that's a standard or a guideline, and as part of that process, we're aware of the details and what's more impactful and what's less impactful. But then as we develop a design or a design concept, then we assess that design against the standards, and that determines whether each of these treatments is low impact, medium impact, or high impact when you assess it against best practice. So the railing itself, the sidewalk, was assessed as being low impact. We've done a number of things to respect the heritage values. The widening at the north end without the suicide prevention was assessed as being low to medium impact. One of the key issues was maintaining some of the key elements, the railing through that section, and also the symmetric approach that we've landed on helps to lessen that. The suicide fencing in that widened section does increase it to high impact. I'll talk more about that at the end. The vehicle barriers themselves along the length of the bridge were medium to high impact. The concrete gravity barriers, if we maintain the barriers that are out there today, there was a fair bit of concern about that. The proposal would be to have an architecturally enhanced concrete barrier for the main section of the bridge. And we're also looking at options now for the north section, either a steel barrier, which was assessed at being low to medium, or maintaining that concrete barrier through. We need to do a deck replacement sometime over the next, longer than 10 years from now. And we thought that the decision about a steel barrier for the full length of the bridge would be something we would do when we come back and do the deck replacement. The suicide fencing, there's no way around this. This is identified as a high impact. It's something that we know, it's something that the Heritage Commission and Heritage advocates understand as well. I think we all agree that it's needed and understand the need, and we all agree that it's got high heritage impact. And so when I say we'll do some further design, detailed design with the Heritage Commission, with our heritage consultants, it won't, I want to be clear, it won't reduce the impact to low or medium. It will be a high impact. What we hope to do is lessen that as much as we can. It's an opportunity to advance perhaps the pedestrian lighting, put those, reestablish the pedestrian lighting, the lamp standards, incorporate that into the fencing so it's less impactful. But I don't want to leave council with the impression that there's some silver bullet here that will magically avoid that trade-off. It is a trade-off. And the commission, you'll hear more, but you'll see there's a motion in the package where I don't want to speak too much for them, but I think they recognize the need and they recognize the impact. And maybe that's as much as what I'll say from the commission, because we do have a motion support. And I guess the last point around heritage is the cumulative impact, and this is something that I think built through the process, is that we've got these various components, and each of them in isolation have an assessment, but then as you put them together, there's a cumulative impact as well. So the recommendation before Council today is that the Council approve the $35 million package of modifications, restore walking to the east crosswalk, improve the safety of the northern intersection. And I've already gone through these, the summary of the benefits in terms of walking, cycling, people driving, goods movement, and safety. So I think that's the presentation, and happy to take questions either now or after the break, however Council wishes to proceed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dobrowolny. No, we're going to take our lunch break now, and that'll give councilors more time to think of more questions.
Excellent.
So we're going to take a break now until 1:45. So we recess this until 1:45. At that time, we will return for questions and then speakers on this item. Thank you.